it's usually assumed. I mean, you can read a whole history of the Mongol Empire, or and such. And Genghis Khan came here, and then they went here, and they destroyed these towns, and they went there, and they fought that battle, and they did it, and all these details, and all through. But nobody ever asked, well, why? Why are they doing all this stuff? Is this just stuff happens again? It's just in a fit of ferocious absent-mindedness, they're at it again? Or what is it? Actually, it's not conquest just for conquest's sake. It's not power just for power's sake. It's rarely power just for power's sake. Of course, individuals try to pursue and project their careers to get up there, to get into positions of power, and will sell their souls for anything. But generally, even they have to operate in a field of interest. There are interests involved. There are very real material interests at stake. There's plunder, and there's tribute, and there are resources and markets, and there's expropriating the land and the crops and the natural resources and the minerals and the wealth and the cheap labor, or in the case of Rome, the slave labor. Let me go back again and read you something else about the Roman Empire. It gets wearisome to read what all the British imperialist chroniclers say about the Roman imperialists, and the Roman imperialists themselves, what they say. So, let me give you a Roman imperialist, Sallust, writing at the time of Julius Caesar. This is what he says about Rome. Avarice was a thing almost unknown. Justice and righteousness were upheld, not so much by law, but by natural instinct. They governed by conferring benefits on their subjects, not by intimidation. That's what he said about the Roman Empire. I mean, it's mind-boggling, It's really rather mind-boggling. Is he talking about the Romans who went into Egypt and plundered and stripped that entire rich kingdom and tore up everything that ever there and turned it into a granary which they plundered? If you want to know why so many countries in the third world are so poor, just look at the history of imperialism. They weren't naturally and inevitably poor. They were made poor. Underdevelopment was something that was imposed on them. They were developing. They had wealth. Many of them had very advanced civilizations. They were forced back and plundered and impoverished. Going back to Rome, King Mithridates, when the Romans came in to his small kingdom, he said, "The Romans have constantly had the same cause, a cause for making war upon all nations, peoples, and kings, the insatiable desire for empire and wealth." And wealth, there's another word, and wealth. He put those together, empires and wealth. Caledonian chief, Caledonia's area, part of what we now call Scotland, right? Calgacus, or Calgacus, I don't know how it's pronounced. "You find in the Romans an arrogance which no reasonable submission can elude. Brigands of the world, they have exhausted the land by their indiscriminate plunder. They create a desolation and call it peace. Our goods and money are consumed by taxation. Our land is stripped of its harvest to fill their granaries." Now we're getting a little closer to things, aren't we? Now we can see what it is. Empires are enormously profitable, mostly for the ruling class. Empires are also enormously costly, mostly for the common populace. The people of Rome didn't do too well on the empires. They got a grain dole and that was it. They often paid the price in blood. They were piled up in tenements and and that's the truth of every empire. The empire feeds off the resources of the republic. And that was true of the Roman Empire in its days, right to the late republic. That was true of the British Empire, and that's true today. The people pay the taxes and do without essentials so that the patricians can pursue their far-off plunder.
Good afternoon and good morning. That is a clip from Michael Parenti, one of my favorite people from the left. Today I'm very excited about today. First of all, we have author of Prejudicial. She's the, I believe, contributing editor for Black Agenda Report, Margaret Kimberley. Welcome. Thank you so much.
Nice to see you.
Oh, nice to see you. You look great. And let me introduce our co-host for today. You know him as another contributor to Black Agenda Report. This nice fellow is Pascal Robert.
Hello, Jason, Margaret. Good to see you both. Looking forward to this episode.
And also coming all the way live from the East Coast, he is a former post 9/11 combat veteran turned hardcore Marxist. He has a very popular show on Twitch, Left Flank Vets. Marcus. He's also got one name, just like Prince.
I also just got what now?
One name, just like Prince.
Yeah. You only need one name. You only need one name. Excited to be here, and I hope I always say this, because I'm usually intimidated by the people that Jason is able to bring together, and so I'm excited to learn and listen and maybe make a good joke every once in a while.
That's kind of my thing. I'm gonna come in with a joke, and then you're gonna see me disappear from time to time because I'm blown away by who's on the show. I'm excited for this show because, first of all, we've been trying to get Margaret on. I'm gonna put Margaret on the spot. We've been trying to get Margaret on for a minute. And we're gonna call Margaret out, and she was like, "I can't do the show right now because I'm just too big at the moment." Yes, with y'all. And I'm like, "Can we get Margaret on this guy?" He goes, "No, Pascal." I was like, I haven't heard back from her. And you turn on the damn internet, and you just see Margaret's ass everywhere. So I'm actually happy to see that people are definitely giving you the props that you are due. So congratulations on some of this success, I'll say.
Well, thank you. You helped promote my book when it was published just about a year ago.
Yes, I did.
So you are a part of that story.
Well, thank you. So I found a quote in your latest piece, and the reason why I use that Parenti excerpt is because Parenti speaks upon empire probably better than anyone that I can think of from that era of the left. Pascal, do you know anyone that is for the praise Chomsky gets? I think Parenti is very.
I think Parenti's very good. I mean, we have the new left era of the 60s. I think we can't forget that we've had a lot of people on the black left. I think Glenn Ford does a very good job.
Glenn Ford, yeah.
As well, but Parenti is very good. But not to toot our own horn, but I think Black Agenda Report with people like Margaret are, the last bastion of really black left critique of imperialism that you'll find on the internet today. I think that particularly in coverage of Africa, the Middle East, the contribution that I've always been honored to just be mildly affiliated with the publication in the extent that I was, being as close as I was to Bruce Dixon. But rest in peace to Bruce Dixon. But the political education that I've got from the publication in terms of my affiliation, and I've put up quite a few articles there, and between Glenn and Bruce and even Margaret as well, is critical. And I'm happy to see that there's a younger generation coming behind now with we Black Lions for Peace. Ajamu Baraka is working with a lot of younger people who are trying to incorporate that analysis. There's a publication called Hood Communist. I think that they're trying to actually do that as well. So it's I've been writing for Black Agenda Report for over a decade, and I remember where there was you could have fit the black left on them in a diner, pretty much, in terms of the black left that was writing it publicly, but at least it's expanding and the analysis is expanding, and I think Margaret is a very important part of that. So as much as I will give Parenti his due, I will not dismiss the extent to which critical anti-imperialist analysis that shaped my perspective comes out of the Black left tradition, without a doubt.
I need
Yeah.
a sound effects board that goes, mm-hmm.
I also want to say thank you, Pascal. Thank you so much. But I also learned a lot from Glenn Ford and the late Bruce. And I know there was a publication called Black Commentator, where I started writing 2004. Jesus, so long ago. And we went out on our own to create a report in 2007. But I think it's important for everybody to realize that there are gaps in all of our knowledge, but it's only by being in solidarity with like-minded people that we educate ourselves. So I will, of course, give us our props at Black Agenda Report, but all the folks that Pascal mentioned. I'm a member of Black Alliance for Peace. I'm on the coordinating committee there. And you mentioned Hood Communist and others. So there are a lot of folks who are communicating now. And we have to use these platforms while we still are able to do so. And,
Yeah, that's very true. While we have them.
Yes.
But back, I thought of the Parenti quote because your latest piece about kind of the intoxication of impeachment finally being over and we have to reconcile with empire. I think empire is the one thing that's just kind of hard for the nation itself to reconcile with, because it is the hidden reality that we're never really paying attention to. On the left, we're definitely always trying to criticize it and call it out. But even in movies that we talked about just recently, like Judas and the Black Messiah, empire is never brought up at all.
No.
At which I don't know. We'll get into that later. A message that I got about that movie. I forgot to send you guys this email that someone sent me privately about that film that was kind of mildly shocking. But I want to read this quote from Margaret. This is from Margaret's latest essay, and I'll put a link up to this in the comments. Democracy is hanging on by a thread because of bipartisan support for neoliberal policies. Democrats and Republicans alike depend upon their respective donor classes and do their bidding. If the rulers want workers back on the job, and they do, they certainly don't want generous income support to become law. The simple fact must be kept hidden with lofty yet phony rhetoric about the U.S. being a good and honorable nation, ruined only by the presence of Trump in the White House.
Yep.
That's a quote from Margaret's latest essay on Black Agenda Report.
Yeah, it was called Impeachment Theater, and I wrote it. I have mixed feelings about the impeachment. I do think it was important to make the case against Trump. Actually, they should have impeached him before. He had been actively trying to undo the election. The Georgia Secretary of State wisely recorded his conversation, and we have to thank him for making it public. That's impeachable. So he should have been impeached several months before this riot on January 6th. So I thought it was important to say that the president can't use a mob to try to undo an election. Having said that, the course, not being honest brokers, use it for their own purposes, mainly to distract the public. And of course, Trump, being who he is, made it easy for them by with this this thing. I don't know what people say. It's an insurrection, a coup, right? I don't know what you call it. But in typical fashion, they make it all about him, that the country is fine, democracy is at risk. We don't have a democracy. We haven't had one for a long time. The little bit of democracy we have is voting, but we're told that's all we can do is vote, and we shouldn't expect to get what we want. So Trump is bad, 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 orange man bad. We have to have Biden. And what do we get? $2,000 becomes $1,400. And Trump is the one who gave us the $2,000 figure. The Democrats had made a deal for only $600. And when Trump said 2,000, they were like, oh, yeah, we meant 2,000. But now it's, 2,000 minus 600. And you may not see it till April, and they may means test it. And student loan debt, well, you can forget that. I can't do that. $1 trillion that are owed by millions of people. The minimum wage, and the original plan was $15 an hour by 2025. So in like 4 years. Now Biden's even backtracking on that. So all of that shows the lack of democracy. Trump makes it easy, of course, that you can point to him and his actions. But Democrats subvert democracy all the time, constantly. And they work hand in glove with the Republicans. So this idea that there's some sacred democracy and the Capitol was this sacred building, almost like a church or something, that was despoiled by this mob when these people do what corporations and wealthy people tell them to, or they give wealthy people positions like Nancy Pelosi, who's worth more than $100 million.
Yeah.
And they are the ones who these people call the shots. So we can't act like the only threat to democracy came from some Trump-inspired yahoos. I think it's also important to point out that what they did is what the U.S. does all around the world. The U.S. is trying to undo, there was an election in Ecuador, for example, about a week or so ago. The leftist candidate won, but not by enough to avoid a runoff. So now the U.S. is involved with his opponent, trying to make sure this guy doesn't win. Or sanctions, which are war by other means, causing people to go hungry, to deprive them of food in Venezuela and Cuba and Iran and Nicaragua, Iran, Syria. People are going hungry in Syria right now as the U.S., speaking of empire, steals Syria's oil and has increased the already very harsh sanctions. So I think it's important for Americans not to think that they had that their hands are clean. The United States overthrows democracy all the time and undoes the will of people all over the world all the time.
I agree with so much what Art was saying, so much of that, and just want to add on because before it was early on primary season, there was some reporting out that Joe Biden, talking to a bunch of his donors, had a quote say, "Nothing will fundamentally change." And I'm actually a little surprised. I'm kind of dumbfounded at how quickly Biden was able to revert back to that position that was of which he was thinking. So a lot of messaging around supporting for Yemen. And then, they even say, hey, like they're not going to, but there's these little national security caveats on there where they say, well, we're not going to support them for offensive measures. Well, we have the Department of Defense, and we are the most offensive empire that the world has ever known. And so recognize, just that whole, just as quickly as Biden's been able to spin and revert back any of the little tiny wins that the left was looking forward to, which, supporting the war or not supporting the wars in Yemen, new immigration policy, all of these things, Biden, they at least said they were going to do the right thing. He said they were going to stop deportations. They've already got up to about 30,000 already. They're opening up new ICE camps. Yeah, this is. I am no longer able to even say well, at least Biden does this. There's not even the at least.
Yeah, Margaret, you brought up some really important points about the importance of Trump and impeachment. I wanted to ask you, as someone who has been writing about the politics of this, what's been going on with both the duopoly, is that, Jason, so Margaret got disconnected. I wanted to talk about the role in which people focusing on Trump as the focus in the center of all that is problematic in American politics creates a situation in which it opens up a space for the Democrats to implement policies that are similar and just tantamount to the same kind of damage that we would normally get from Trump or normal Republican, and how, particularly with the rise of Trump, there was this kind of feeling that get rid of Trump by any means. He's got to go. He's got to go. And the question I've always wondered is that, well, what exactly are the politics that we're going to support if everything is reduced to simply, we got to get rid of Trump?
That's just it. There is no politics in that. There's only only the fake, like the fake faux wins, and that's basically what everyone wanted. Hey, Biden will win, and then they want you all to go back to brunch because, and this was scary.
It's kind of working because it's not working. I think in the sense that we thought it was going to work. Excuse me. Where and first off, Margaret's having some connection issues, and this is the way we do talk shows now, right? In the new COVID era, unfortunately.
I feel like her contribution, it was incredible. She dropped a bomb and it was just like, all right.
It was like, all right,
y'all fuck with that a little bit.
It's interesting because I feel like the impeachment and now Ted Cruz and Texas is really helping with the brunch.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, when the discourse isn't empire, when the discourse is like, oh, Ted Cruz threw his daughter under the bus, what a shitty guy. It's like, well, yeah, I guess. But I think it's more interesting that when shit hit the fan, he felt very comfortable to go to Cancun, whatever the reason is. He felt very comfortable to be like, I'm out of here. This is not my problem. And when we go way back in time to before even Joe Biden got into politics, which, that's what, 72, right? there was
1812.
I'm talking, if you think back before the movie industry becomes a controlling factor, to be a great person, you had to do great things. And that was like I'm going to do this great thing. Even Herbert Hoover was known as like the great philanthropist because he fed, 3 million Belgians or whatever it was. These guys don't aspire to even attempt to give you the illusion that they lead.
So what has been created is like an idea of the statesman or the statesperson.
Yeah,
and
that's a great concept. That's really, to interrupt. The facade of the statesman. That's a very important concept that Marcus has just touched on. That even when I didn't mean to interrupt you, Marcus, but I really want to.
Please, you're gonna say it better than I am.
Because even what was the marketing that was used to convey to America that Biden was a more qualified and better option than Trump? It was the illusion of the statesman that, one of the things that makes Trump is that Trump disturbs all of the traditional bourgeois notions of effective state management. In other words, when we look at Obama, who took us from 3 theaters of war to 7, caused one of the greatest increase of wealth inequality in major American history, going back to the Gilded Age. Help cause 50% of Black wealth evaporated. Decimated hundreds of thousands of Black and brown teachers with pre-charterization. But the thing is, though, Obama is loved because he was an effective statesman. In terms of what he was able to do for empire was so slick and smooth. His ability to maintain the bourgeois pretense of management was wonderful. But the thing that makes Trump so unconscionable in the minds of people is not so much what he's actually doing, is that he has no regard for the actual bourgeois pretense.
It's a lack of decorum.
Yeah, total lack of decorum. But Biden, who has been signing on to some of the worst politics we've had for almost 50 years, because he's the nice guy, he's supposed to be the actual, more effective statesman when he's actually been part of the bipartisan consensus. So, I mean, that's a very important point. I didn't mean to kind of
No, yeah, I mean, I'm happy you did, because you say things a lot more eloquently than my ass does. So I appreciate, because that's just what it is. It's like some people get to this role, they get, hey, I just won my second election as senator. Now I am a statesman, just off of being here, just off of the title of United States Senator, right? And you look at Susan Collins. You look at Joe Manchin, all of this walking the middle ground, absent of any moral or critical thought of what's actually happening, just the desire to be in the middle. That is this faux statesman type of idea that they're just trying to ride out on.
Well, listen, we'd like to hear Margaret's take on this. She's
I'm back. Hi, I don't know what happened. But anyway, I'm back with you all. And I'm glad you mentioned Texas. That's something that's really been on my mind this past week, as it has for many people. Once again, we see, and it was interesting when Parenti opened up, he talked about how empire didn't help the people very much. So we have this country where we're always told America's a rich country, and I don't know what that means. Does that mean there's a lot of money in the treasury? Does it mean there are a lot of rich individuals? It certainly doesn't mean that the people get what they need. And this week, and by the way, not just in Texas, people in Jackson, Mississippi don't have running water. They were hit with that same storm. So we have a country which, despite being called advanced, democratic, a rich country, whatever, can't provide for literally the most basic need if something goes wrong. I mean, talk about the hierarchy of need: food, shelter, water. People are dead in Texas. I can't imagine not being in single-digit temperatures with no electricity. That is empire. They are living in this country where defense spending is 60% of the discretionary budget. That means literally we cannot have nice things, because the country, the government cannot spend that money on 800 bases around the world, a huge military budget, and make sure that we have the infrastructure that we need in order to literally survive. So, and that's an empire. And that's why I say, and we always say at Black Alliance for Peace, you cannot divorce the domestic from the international. People want to think that they can elect a progressive who never are able to do anything progressive. The system is set up to make sure they don't do anything. And that we can forget about military spending or wars or any of that. It is all connected. You're not going to have democracy at home. You're not going to have our needs met at home while you also have this empire. It is not going to work that way. It never has worked that way. So we have a poverty draft. And if they can't get people to join the military, then they impose sanctions and kill people that way. So we have to own up to living in an empire. we have to own up to the lack of democracy. The country is not anything that we're always told that it is, and that is where we are. That's why people don't have water or heat. I mean, Texas is peculiar. It's like an outlier, white supremacy state where they decided they didn't want to have their electrical grid connected to other states because they're the Lone Star State or something like that. So, of course, they have no backup if something goes wrong.
The United States of Texas.
Yes. So, and if they want to secede, I say bye, okay, fine. But that's not going to happen. That's BS. But at any rate, we are seeing in real time what happens with an empire, and an empire is antithetical to democracy. We see this, we live this, but there have been studies that show you don't get what you want, even if the person you want wins, even if the party you prefer is the one in power, you still don't get what you want. So that is why impeachment is theater. It has to be theater. It cannot be anything real. But they're still trying to milk it. They're talking about a 9/11 type commission for January 6th. It's so stupid. The 9/11 commission we had was BS.
Let me ask you, Margaret, I want to ask you a question.
To know about September 11th. So more BS and to distract us.
Do the Democrats need Trump to obfuscate from the fact that they're not trying to govern?
Yes.
Sure. He's a perfect
100%.
foil. They always have a boogeyman. It's, it was Newt Gingrich, or it was the Koch brothers, or it was Rush Limbaugh who kicked the bucket this week. There's always someone they can point to and say, see, it's either us or that horrible person. And Trump was a horrible person, but they're horrible too. So they need to have a foil. He is the perfect foil, and Trump isn't going to disappear. So he helps them even more. He's still trying to have influence in the Republican Party, creating problems for them. It should be fun to watch. So yes, absolutely. They are going to raise up that specter. And there was such a desire to be rid of him. I'm afraid they can get away with it for a while. But we shall see. Americans, though, I mean, people in Texas ought to rise up. I mean, if they don't do anything else when they're not waiting online trying to buy water because their taps are dry. But we don't see that, and that lack of popular opposition. We don't have a government that's afraid of us. So.
Yeah, and I think once again, Margaret's making fantastic points of what is the American empire? How can you just say, this Biden's going to be better? Something that we talk about a lot on our stream is it's a book. It was like a speech turned to a book almost 100 years ago. War is a Racket, written by General Smedley Butler. He starts laying out the actual beginnings of the military-industrial complex. Dwight D. Eisenhower ends up coining the phrase military-industrial complex, describing the fact that, hey, every dollar we spent on a bomb is a dollar lost on teaching a kid, and we have just accelerated into a point where our country is indistinguishable from just a giant war machine, and to the point of what props up the other, and that's where also when it comes into some stuff that's happening on the border right now, so when you get issue with Texas, also there's an issue of what's going on with the detention camps in Texas, so when you talk about all this spectacle and stuff like that, they're going after Trump. There are things that Joe Biden has done within his 4 weeks to make this situation in the ground in Texas worse. And just the fact that his neoliberal mindset is never going to be engaged to actually solving those type of problems, right? It's always going to be, hey, let's send FEMA and try and make a less amount of people die. But as far as what comes next, they're just going to hand the power grid back over to these private corporations. And with the Democrats, that's just their only go-to move. And it's also a largely American move in general. And we can see this with Red Scare tactics. It's it's coming up again between China or Iran, where they say, this is happening is bad. And so, hey, war might not be great, but we just have to do it. And so Republicans are so bad that Democrats say, hey, we might not be the best, but we're better than them. And so they will do the same dichotomy, coming up with I'm expecting Iran, or, they're trying to really push a lot of economic stuff with China, which, like Margaret has said before, sanctions are just early warfare options. So
yeah, they are. And you said something interesting. I saw it on Twitter, and I retweeted it. A guy who lives in Austin, Texas, who said, he tweeted this a couple of days ago. He didn't have power, he didn't have water, and he said, I'm asking President Maduro of Venezuela to impose sanctions on the U.S. and save us. A very good joke, I thought. But yeah, that's what they do. It's and by the way, I'm going all over the place. So much good material here about China or any country that's being demonized. We can count on the fact that we're being lied to. It's another story about the Uyghurs in China. Everything you're reading about China and the Uyghurs is a lie. Everything, all of it. And if you read The Gray Zone this week, Max Blumenthal and Gareth Porter do a good job of breaking down how this lie began. So when we're told Vladimir Putin's evil, no, actually Xi Jinping is evil, no, actually it's Maduro, Assad, and unless you say you want to keep destroying Syria, you're an Assadist. They even create a new word. It's always a lie, always, always, always. But that's another way to support the empire, because you have to have some popular support, and you only get that, you get buy-in when people are told, when somebody else is demonized and people say, oh my God, country X is so horrible. So whatever it is they want to do, a coup and, an intervention, a sanction, whatever, it must be, we've got to do that because most people want to think of themselves as being good. And, in the case of China, you're called a genocide denier. I am denying there's a genocide in China. It's a lie. But that's how they get buy-in for doing all sorts of horrible things while we suffer here in any number of ways. I mean, and we're seeing the worst case scenario in Texas, but we're all Texas. Everybody in this country is living on the edge when in this country that does not provide for the needs of the people. And it's always nature. I always think it's funny. It's we had Hurricane Sandy here in New York. I guess that was 2012. And I remember that Doctors Without Borders were going into public housing developments here in New York City because people couldn't get out. They, didn't have electricity for their elevators or something. There was a hurricane that hit Texas a few years ago. And as a result, and the refinery shut down, people across the South couldn't find gasoline. COVID. Let's talk about COVID for the past. And seeing how nature has laid the country low and exposed the fact that our healthcare system, the for-profit healthcare system, is the problem for us. And it was, Trump being such a buffoon, it was easy to blame him for everything. And I'm not saying he doesn't deserve any, but I think the United States would have had a huge death toll even if he wasn't the president.
Well, I want to touch on that with Trump again, because there are many people who have accused us on the left of being quote unquote Trump apologists. Some people are saying call it the Trumpian left because we don't acknowledge or we don't focus all of our ire on Trump as being the quote unquote, some would even dare to say fascist that he is. There are even some on the left that, tend to want to castigate other figures who have looked at Trump as simply a long chain of iteration of, rightward moves on the American body politic from the ruling class, and is, truly ugly and grotesque, But when have the right have not been ugly and grotesque? Bush was considered, an abomination as well as Reagan. I am not making the argument that someone would try to trap me in here, that's saying there aren't things that distinguish Trump. I've already admitted that one of the things that distinguished Trump is that he did not make the pretense to surrender to the bourgeois norms of statecraft that were demanded of the presidency. But what do you make of these calls from not only liberals, but even some on the left that demand that, all factions of the left gather around in some kind of almost kind of united front to fight Trump, which because Trump is a fascist, fascism is on the rise, et cetera, so on and so forth. And we've talked about this before, but I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, how that politics works out and the reaction of those who use it.
Sure. It's, well, there, these people that you're talking about, they also need Trump. They're still foaming at the mouth about Trump. And if you weren't obsessed with Trump like they were, you were Trump left or something stupid.
Weird.
Unless you had this obsession with this, and Trump is unique in that way. He triggers people so badly. I believe it is partly the man. He triggers people so much that people who are otherwise intelligent, otherwise having good analysis, suddenly lost it. And if you didn't hate Trump as much as they did and blame him for everything, you were a Trump supporter. It's good though, because now we know who we should not pay attention to. But yeah, you can't be Trump centric and Trump obsessed, because his awfulness as a person helped to, it's a funny thing. He was bad for the brand. So these other presidents, because, they'd held public office before, because they knew the importance of getting buy-in from people, they always had this veneer of respectability, and the corporate media would help them, always help them. They would help Trump too. When he wanted to bomb Syria or overthrow the government in Venezuela, if he stuck to straight up imperialism, they would support him. New York Times or Washington Post, they always supported those things. But so yes, there are people on the left also who use Trump for their own ends. But I think those people are mostly just confused. They're just very.
Do you think Trump is bad for the brand, or Trump is a rebranding from the old brand? Like, and I can't remember of the Republican political operative, but like literally on his deathbed was admitting to, oh yeah, we lie, we cheat, we steal. It's the plan. Do you think like Trump is actually going back to that?
Yeah, he was. He didn't cover it up. So, somebody like Obama could make you believe that there was a good reason. I mean, and they did it with lies that, the U.S. had to destroy Libya because there was about to be a massacre, and Gaddafi got Viagra so his troops could rape women, and all kinds of lies to get buy-in for destroying this country. There's still no functioning Libyan government 10 years later.
There's an open slave market that's created in the way of what Obama did. Yeah.
A few weeks ago, I was watching the NewsHour, and they had a story on the migrant crisis in the Mediterranean, and didn't mention Obama and didn't mention Libya. How do you talk about that issue and not mention his name, not talk about policy in Libya and Syria that created this migrant crisis? But, Obama did and still does have buy-in with them. So they will never talk about him the way in which they ought to. I often think if Obama were president and there was a pandemic, I mean, he was a smart man, very slick. He would have, people would have actually felt sorry for him. And whatever the outcome, people would have said, well, Obama's doing the best he can do. But that's what the system needs. The system needs people who are better at those things than Trump was.
I have to ask the question real quick from the chat. Someone says, well, what is the Marxist response to, I think when we're talking about empire.
To empire.
Yeah. What is the Marxist response? Someone asked.
Well, you have to analyze that as a Marxist and first of all, call it what it is. Call it an empire. And it doesn't matter if some politician says, no, we don't have an empire. Well, we do. We do. This country does. And first of all, call it that. And then give that analysis of what the situation really is here. And say that you're a Marxist. Say that this is the Marxist analysis. We have so much BS that's sold to us as good analysis, which is lies and all kinds of things that are untrue. So I'm also glad that we were talking about many people now who are giving this analysis, and that's why it's so important. That's why they want to control these platforms, which we thought, this is the answer. We can have our own platform. We can have our own website. We can be on social media. And that's why they don't want us to have them. That's why Facebook is kicking people off every day. Someone sends me a message or a text. I've been kicked off of Facebook. They took the president. They took Trump off of Twitter. And he's been deplatformed, and I don't want to defend the nonsense he says, but is it really worse than making the case for war, making the case for sanctions, making the case for austerity, making the case for suffering of millions of people just because he's obnoxious? But that tells you if they can get him off, they can get all of us off. And that's why they don't want us on, because someone could people do give a Marxist analysis of what's going on now.
I have a clip I want to show you guys. It's from the new White House speaker. What is her name? Psaki?
Psaki, Jen Psaki.
Redheaded girl is what I call her.
You said a redhead girl? This is a clip of her.
Oh, is this from back in the day?
Yeah, it's from 2015 when she was the speaker for. What was she speaker for at the time? State Department.
State Department.
State Department speaker. And this is a question that's being asked about U.S. intervention in Venezuela at the end of Obama. So this was around the time of, I think this was before the drones came and they had to shoot down those drones when Maduro was talking. If you guys remember that.
Yeah.
This is before that. There were definitely several coup attempts. Of course, we all know about the famous one in 2003 with Hugo Chavez. So to say that the U.S. hasn't been involved in any sort of like Latin American coup attempts is quite interesting. So this is Jen Psaki, who is the new adult in the room, right? She's not one of these quote unquote fascist Barbies, which is a term I learned being on Marcus, fascist Barbie, and I will say it. And
it's a good term.
It's what they are. Fox News is the land of the fascist Barbie. They should make little action figures for them.
I'm afraid that they already have them.
So here's the clip. Check this out. Hold on, I fucked up and forgot to open it.
Like all previous such accusations are ludicrous. As a matter of long-standing policy, the United States does not support political transitions by non-constitutional means. Political transitions must be democratic, constitutional, peaceful, and legal.
The U.S. has whoa. The U.S. has a long-standing practice of not promoting. What did you say? How long-standing is that? In particular, in South and Latin America, that is not a long-standing practice.
I love that. I love that.
I saw that on the cat's page. Actually, a cat from out here. He's the dude with the mask that does the I think he's called the 415 Marxist or something like that, and he does like these long educational series on like China, socialism with Chinese characteristics and stuff like that. I think you young people call him a tanky, but I thought that clip was fucking priceless. Even though it's from 2015, it still says a lot about to what you guys have been saying in this discussion, how we view the two-party system and just the way that Sean Spicer was handled, and then Huckabee after him. Bless you.
Thank you.
And here we have the new Democratic Party regime speaker, and she does not, and that's from 2015. That's not that long ago.
No, it isn't. It's it's funny because you mentioned Sean Spicer, that poor man. He was so horrible, so out of his depth. I almost felt bad for him. So Biden would not have a Sean Spicer. I mean, he gets these people. They were all Obama. The new Secretary of State was an Undersecretary of State for Obama. These are people who are experienced and skilled at with their lives. But it's interesting. She said, well, we don't, what did she say? Not non-constitutional means. So in Venezuela was claimed that Juan Guaido was the one following the Constitution, and Maduro's not the president anymore. So they will do stuff like that, or just undo an election, or get proxies to do their dirty work. But I'm glad she was called out for it. That was a priceless.
And it's something that's like kind of a weird thing. That's like I remember being in the Marine Corps on duty, where like we're just sitting in a room, like making sure no one enters the building. Like we're on base and everything. But on the TV they have C-SPAN. C-SPAN is running. Like they're just doing the White House press briefing, and me and the Marine I'm with are laughing because we can tell that the press secretary is just lying. We don't know anything about politics at the time, but we know what a liar looks like. Yeah. And like we don't have, and like we're like, this is the only TV that we're allowed to watch, you know, and like we're just there. Oh man, this person is a fantastic liar. We were talking about how much we could wish we could lie like this person does whenever our someone starts asking us questions, holding us accountable. And that's the thing, is like with whether it's the Dancing with the Stars guy, Scaramucci, or
I was going to say Sean Spicer, because
Sean Spicer, yeah, Sean Spicer, whether it's Scaramucci or the last McEnany.
Oh,
that's there. Like we talked about earlier, no decorum, and they're bad liars.
Yeah, and it's not very smart people either.
Yeah,
and they're not trained to. Somebody like Jen Psaki, she's been doing this for decades now,
at least since 2015.
Yes, they've been doing this for years. They know they know how to lie, and they all get credibility from each other. The corporate media supports them. They support the corporate media. So they are telling us lies. And it's terrible because people want to be informed. So they say, well, I'll watch the news and be informed. I'll read the New York Times. I'll know what's going on in the world. But you don't. If you consume that information, unless you know who to follow on social media, unless you have the wherewithal to really spend that much time, and if you have that much interest, then you know what's going on in the world. So it's a self-perpetuating propaganda system, and Americans don't like to think of themselves as being propagandized, as being indoctrinated, and we are very much indoctrinated.
Oh yeah. I mean, you got people who go up in arms over saying the Pledge of Allegiance. Mm-hmm. That doesn't come without a heavy level of indoctrination.
No, it doesn't. The Pledge of Allegiance, or the dead presidents on the money, or the fact that we have President's Day. This was President's Day was just on Monday, and we're told to revere these awful people who I swear, buy my book, by the way. Where's my book? Hold up. I'll just figure out, get another plug in. Buy my book, Presidential Black American Presidents. It's a great book.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the book Presidential Black America and the Presidents, which I actually did.
Cornel West has a shout. He has a big
blurb.
blurb in
from
this
Cornell.
book.
I'm very grateful for that. He's very generous that way.
Yeah, I want moving to the book about presidential Black America and the presidents, and I'd like us to move actually to Black politics. Is that, and in a common theme that we have in Black Agenda Report is the Black misleadership class or the Black political class, and how they basically work as functionaries of the Democratic Party, largely to the detriment of the Black. To the larger Black population, usually in exchange for patronage position or whatever other kind of benefits they can get. With the rise, I'd like you to talk about not only so much with the rise of Biden and how the institutional politics of Black politics on the electoral level, let's distinguish the electoral level, is so wedded to the center of the Democratic Party. And in the face of that, what has it meant with this new burgeoning, when I mean new, over the last, since 2015, this left development of quote unquote Sanders progressives, if you will, that have come about, that we see a certain kind of friction. We see that with the Congressional Black Caucus, with members of the quote unquote squad over people being primaried, so on and so forth. So the question I want to ask you, and this is actually the theme of the book I'm writing, is that what exactly is the political consequence for Black politics that we have the electoral core of Black politics in the right flank of the Democratic Party, and we have this burgeoning development to the left of that policy, to the left of that politics, largely made up of white progressives?
Well, it's the outcome is you get Joe Biden as president and 90% of Black people voting for this horrible man. But you talk about the role of the Black misleadership class, the Black political class. I mean, you see what they did. This Congressman, what's his name from South Carolina, Clyburn. We're told he's a what's the term they use for him? Kingmaker. I mean, it's just so stupid. And, that would be true if he were an independent actor, but he's part of the Democratic Party leadership, and they all made their decisions. It's going to be Biden, so you're going to endorse Biden. Of course he goes along with it. So though people like that, we're told, are our leaders, and they get the goodies. They get to be elected to office, and they're not primaried, and they get a lot of. Clyburn is the biggest recipient of big pharma money of any member of Congress. So people get an end. Now Biden's in, so they're all getting good jobs. I'm not denying anybody a good gig, but that's not a reason for the rest of us to follow them. And we have to, I think the end result will be that we have to deprioritize electoral politics, because it's so, I mean, at the very, the most benevolent thing you can say is that it's very limited. Our lives don't improve because Joe Biden is president instead of Trump. Our sensibilities may be offended a little less often, but we get the same thing. And that's why it's so important to have a movement. The movement should come first. If the political system delivers for us, it's always because of a movement. That was, we fetishize the civil rights movement. We hear about it all the time. And nobody talks about what they did. They made demands they knew politicians didn't want to meet, but they persisted over years. And that is why, if it can be said we got anything from the government, it's because of people who opposed politicians, who practice self-determination. That's how it's done, or should be done.
I want to add one thing. Speaking of the civil rights movement, last night I did an interview. I won't get too much into it, but I interviewed someone for the audio podcast about Sam Cooke, about his death. It was more of a true crime episode, and I'm still kind of going back and forth on how I want to do that. But it made me go down a rabbit hole of watching one of my favorite true crime shows, an old show from the 90s and early 2000s called American Justice. It used to come on A&E that Bill Curtis used to host. And they had a whole episode on the sting with the DC mayor smoking crack.
Marion Barry. Yes.
Marion Barry. And Marion Barry got his start in the kind of the tail end of the civil rights movement.
Good.
And a big reason why people loved him in DC is that when he finally got into office, he actually put black men to work. And DC was a very violent city in the 70s, if you guys remember. And I'm not saying this, is the reason why it's totally fine for the mayor of DC to snort copious amounts of cocaine and then get caught smoking crack in a hotel room. But
he was set up. What did he say? The bitch set me up.
Bitch set me up. Well, you know what's even funnier? If you go watch the show, maybe we'll end with that clip of American Justice's the black cop that's arresting Marion Barry, or not the cop, the FBI agent, basically caught, and this is how it always happens, caught a bigger drug dealer in the Virgin Islands. That guy, of course, starts telling on everybody. It's like, well, we got proof that we got a Marion Barry, he's the biggest cocaine snorter around. And they got a woman that he used to mess with back in the day.
Yep.
She was in a homeless shelter in LA. Cleaned her up, brought her back to DC, and they're like, look, you can't smoke crack with this fool. You can't do dope with this fool. So she's just sitting there trying to get him high. And he goes, how do you do it? Because he doesn't know how.
I remember that. He thought he was going to have sex. He was like,
he kept asking for ass the whole time.
Going to happen. And so his old flame shows up, and that's what he thinks. And it took her a long time to get him to do it, but that was what he was there for, because they had nothing else. They weren't there to see him have sex with her. But yes, I'd almost forgotten all of that.
It was so interesting to see. Also, I have a surprise here because it's Saturday. I hit this cat up and I was like, hey, can you come on? This will be a fun time, because he's over here commenting on the chat. Professor at the University of California, Riverside, Dylan Rodriguez, author of White Reconstruction. He's been commenting on the chat.
Yes, yes.
So now the gang's all here. The left get along gang is all here.
I follow all you people. I follow all you people. All I put in chat is that bar is on my homepage every day. Every day I open and read the news. Bar is literally the first place I go to read. And I've my biggest pride is being interviewed by Glenn more than once, and having y'all publish a couple of my things up there. Bar is my favorite. I've always had Black Agenda Report front and center ever since what do you call it, the prison strike in Georgia. Ever since the Georgia prison strike,
Bruce Dixon, the late Bruce Dixon.
That's right.
One of the best pieces of journalism he did. We're the only ones who reported that.
You took the words out of my mouth. That's exactly what I was going to say.
Georgia went on a work strike. It was an interracial effort. It was crushed, and these horrible preachers in Georgia helped to crush it. But if people can look back in our archives and find those, that was amazing reporting.
Shout out to Bruce Dixon, man.
Yeah, I mean, that's legendary. The biggest prison strike in the history of the hemisphere.
Yep.
In the history of the Americas, not just the United States, of the Americas. New York Times didn't cover that shit. Washington Post didn't cover that shit. Nobody covered that except Barr, right? And so I was already on Barr before that, but then at that point I was like, all right, Barr is my first source every day now, and it literally is. So I'm a big admirer of the work.
Thanks so much. Thank you very much. That was we've done a lot. It's sometimes I forget. Sometimes when you're in the midst of something, you forget. Sometimes I forget especially if you write every week, which is hard to do. I'm like, and when we started, Jason's like, let's talk about what you just wrote this week. And I was like, oh my God, for like a second, I had to stop and think. But I'm very proud. And blackagendareport.com every Wednesday. And we're getting better and better. So we have Bar Review. We talk about things we've written over the past few years. We have Bar Book Forum. We have a great new cartoonist. Cartoonist. We have a poet. We do great stuff. So I am urging those who may not follow us as closely to read blackagendareport.com every week.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No question, without a doubt.
Hey, when I started listening this morning, I just heard y'all talking about Marion Barry. You know I'm from Alexandria, right?
Yeah, you're from Norva. I forgot about that. I watched that thing, man, and there's a documentary on Amazon about Marion Barry. Definitely a very pro Marion Barry documentary. When he went to run for city council in the 2010s, I think it was. He ran again for city council, and the woman that he was running against was like, "Look, this fool is just running because he's broke, and this is like a last minute cash grab for him to try to make any kind of money." I think he was like staying in a motel, like he really was kind of down on.
Oh God, man!
But that whole Marion Barry thing is literally seen through the lens of him holding the pipe to his mouth and smoking it, and then the police charging in, and when you hear the prosecutor say this is American justice on A&E. This is not some. I like Bill Curtis for a lot of the true crime he's done. If you're a fan of that stuff, you know he was actually on the front lines of like what's the guy? Charles Manson is what really broke his career in LA. So he's an old school journalist, but at the end of the day, he really got sucked up into what was popular in the late 80s and 90s of just kind of gossip journalism. And when you hear the prosecutor say, "We really didn't want the tape shown," the main piece of evidence, they're like, "We were really worried about that." I thought that was very interesting.
It is. It just shows you we can't believe everything we see, or we can believe some of it, or you have to look for yourself. And at first I was like, "Oh my God, he smoked crack." And then I looked and I was like, "Wait a minute. She had to beg him to smoke crack. It took her like a half an hour to get him to do
everything he was saying." So they have a female FBI person selling drugs, and she comes in and she's trying to sell Marion Barry some rocks, and he's like, "No, I don't want any." She leaves, and he looks at homegirl and he's like, "Hey, your friend get down too?" Because he's trying to bang both of them. He's not even trying to get high. He's just trying to bang both of them. And he's constantly trying to like, "Hey, we gonna do it before you leave. I know you're in town for one day. We got time. So finally she's like, "Look, I'm gonna go buy some crack." He's like, "Well, fine, go buy some crack from homegirl." The lady sells crack to the woman, and the woman is not allowed to smoke it.
She just has to get him to do it.
She has to get him to do it. So she's saying, "I don't know how to do it. What? I don't know how to do it. I don't do it. I don't do this." And so finally, when he puts it up to his mouth, he's like this? You do like this, huh? And that's when they come in and get him. And it's a bit of comedy. I mean, Marion Barry, again, at that point, I think he was on his third term. Pascal has a amazing term that was in my head as I'm falling asleep watching it called "fat back and biscuits."
Yes.
And, maybe fat cracks and biscuits. I don't know what he was on that day. But Marion Barry, to me, is kind of the epitome of that. Another thing we also talk about, even when we talk about people like Clyburn, I've seen people have a lot of comments about Jim Clyburn, that these politicians have to do something for their community for people to keep voting them back in. Even though,
I mean, definitely, it's a patriotism.
Something, or and this is another reason they love Trump. So when Trump was in and the Democrats had lost control of, and Republicans ran everything, they could say, "Well, the Republicans are in, I can't do fill in the blank." So, but now even when they're in it, still we can't do fill in the blank. It's like, oh no, if we relieve student loan debt, that would be millions of dollars added to the treasury, and it's not 2,000, it's 1,400. And that's the other reason they love Trump. They have to have a villain, because now people practically brag about, it's so sad to me, about not making any demands. Well, he's not Trump, so screw me, forget what I want and need. I'm not going to talk about what I need, because if I do that, I'm a spoiler, and then Trump and blah, blah, blah. So they have to do actually less and less and less in order to stay in office.
I vividly remember this mantra about don't ask, don't make any demands being replicated earlier with Obama. I remember there was actually an article was written by, I forget the name of it. It was a Harvard professor making the argument. It might have been in The Root. It was actually a black professor making the argument that black people should not make demands of the Obama presidency and should be thankful that he's just there, that his presence alone somehow should edify them. And this was this is someone who was a Harvard University professor, and you would think that kind of really ridiculous pseudo politics you could understand so much. You could understand because of the racial symbolism and intoxication that came with Obama. But what's more definitely just incomprehensible is that it's being used for Biden now, and particularly considering the horrendous record that Biden has vis-a-vis the African American community
and Kamala. Don't forget about Kamala
and Kamala. Kamala Harris as well. I call them the mass incarceration ticket when they were running, as a matter of fact.
And can we talk? I'm going to interrupt you a little because I do have to jump off. I'm sorry about my loss of Wi-Fi earlier and cut into our time, but what was I? Oh, his meeting with people labeled civil rights leaders, and
we had a whole show about it.
And whoever leaked that, I love forever, because it was important for us to see how he feels about Black people. We're all corn pop to him. The fact that he even told that stupid story was anyway. But that, he's still Jim Crow Joe, bragging about the crime bill. It does everything except give you the death penalty for jaywalking or something like that.
Yep. Didn't somebody just get killed recently for jaywalking?
Yep. We covered that the other day. Cops harassing a home. It was the homeless team, the homeless enforcers.
Yeah. They were supposed to be the ones that
absolutely insane to me, right? But people who are working with people experiencing homeless, all kid up, flak, all that shit. And someone crosses the street. In the video, the cops are just in their car. They're like, one cop says, haha, we're about to catch this guy jaywalking. The guy jaywalks. All right, let's get him. And the one dude's like, you serious, man? Oh yeah, we gotta protect the streets. And they just to fuck with these people, I end up killing them.
Yep. That's it. That's human rights in America.
And that's the homeless response team.
That was the whole.
You can tell extra training. Their purpose is to enforce against
exactly
unhoused.
But you're supposed to have the latest audio only podcast. I was lucky enough to have a woman who actually works in that world of like counseling drug users in the homeless world, and she had to do it not under her name because it was kind of like one of those tell-all shows, right, where you talk about the inner workings of how the system works. And one of the main things that she said in the episode is, I don't think this stuff is going to work having counselors as police officers, because one thing I said is, where are they going to come from? First of all, are they going to be government employees? You have a solution? Are you saying?
No, I'm telling you this that I'm just listening to y'all talk. By the way, nice to meet you, Marcus.
Yeah, I caught you the last time you were on the other show.
I feel like I know Margaret just from bar, but I lurk your all's work all the time, left like this. And so now, okay. So Jason, you know what you literally just said you may or may not have realized it. What you literally just said is that we are in a wave of centrist liberal police reform that is actually deputizing and expanding police power. That's what's happening.
Right. Yeah. Well, we have to ask who is it going to be? Defunding the police sounds nice. They can play with numbers. In New York, they just switched school security guards from police to Department of Education and said, "See, we defunded the police," except they didn't.
You can defund the police and also expand police power.
You said you can privatize. So there's school districts who say we're not going to have government employees in the school. We're going to have privatized rent-a-cops.
And you can turn social workers you can empower social workers to now have police power. I'm involved with all these debates and conversations with my colleagues in different university and college settings right now about the mandatory reporting structure. Right, and we're talking about how in relation to sexual violence and gender violence, it's been shown over and over again that if you were a mandatory reporter, it actually represses reporting of sexual harassment and gender violence and sexual violence, right? Because people don't want to confide in you because they know that you have to go basically to the state. You have to go to the administration and the state to report that stuff. So when we see the Democratic Party, for example, or the nonprofit industrial complex, for example, start to seize on and canonize phrases like defund the police, or even install it as the main point of debate, that's when, as Fanon would say, that's when it's time to sharpen our knives. That's when it's time to get suspicious and skeptical. Because the point of what's happening right now is that there might be some really piecemeal, symbolic and ceremonial displays of reducing and reforming the actual formal police apparatus. But what's happening by way of Biden and Kamala Harris and everything that's around them is actually a moment in which police power is expanding. That's what's happening. Look at Lori Lightfoot. I need y'all's help. I'm supposed to go to this event at UC Berkeley at some point in the next few days. I'm not part of the panel or anything, but like a friend of mine like asked me to go to the event. Yeah. Basically yell at Lori Lightfoot, right? Because here you have the first Black, lesbian woman mayor of Chicago, like this major symbolic kind of thing. And she's got this history. She's no different than Kamala Harris. She's no different than Joe Biden.
Let's push back on her.
They're not gonna. These are the people they're going to promote. They're not going to change who they put in power. They just, if they're very smart, then it's a woman who's Black, who's also gay, and aren't you supposed to be happy? And she still supports the system. But guys, I have to jump now.
Okay. Thank you, Margaret.
Sorry about that, but I do have to. I've got to run.
Thank you very much, Margaret. Hopefully, when we see more work come about, we can invite you on again.
Yes, I would love to. Just give me a lot of notice. And I can do it. I'd love to come back. Sorry about the
No, it's all good. Thank you so much.
All right, guys. Bye-bye. Where's my piece? There you go. All right. Bye-bye.
That was Margaret Kimberley, author of Prejudicial.
Something she was saying is like actually someone was like just fucking like been able to kind of like solidify that thought, right? There's like the Republicans, they will lie to you about the problem and they will lie to you about the solution. The Democrats will tell you the truth about the problem and they get somebody from the marginalized community to lie to you about the solution.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's just the modus operandi, like across the fucking board.
The new podcast that's up, I'm actually pretty excited about it because this is a person that I'm actually friends with on Facebook, but she was like, I'll do the show, but if you don't say my name. So we're having this conversation. And, at some points of it, she actually got very emotional and started to tear up because when you work in the world of like counseling people in general, you're always going to make a connection. And it's funny because also too, there's a level of burnout that you get that is unlike any other because you don't want to ever, and she says it, she goes, you don't want to get desensitized to certain things. And she goes, you never want to be like, okay, now are you the girl that got molested by her uncle? Or are you the girl that got sold into sex slavery by her stepdad? Which one are you?
Yeah.
You never want that to be kind of like whatever to you. And one of the things I said, it might have been in the bonus coverage of it, but I said, have you ever gotten paid overtime for paperwork? And she goes, no. That's part of policing. No. And also when this stuff goes third party, when the government says, okay, we're going to go to this agency that has a great reputation, the agency may have a great reputation, but they also are probably going to hire whoever the fuck wants the job. And those people may not be as qualified as you think because burnout is so high in that world. So when Bart says we're going to have social workers respond to mental health crises, it's like, well, the only mental health crises you're going to see on Bay Area public transportation is, and as Dylan knows this from living out here, is a homeless person losing their shit on the train because that's where they sleep, right? How long is that person going to last in that role? What qualifications are they going to have? And if we're not making people's material conditions better, as my guest said, then what are you really fucking doing at the end of the day? It's just a slogan that sounds great because we're all tired of seeing snuff films on TV.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my 2 cents on it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, the question I want to ask, since we have this new panel, we have Dylan. Shout out to Dylan on
Chilling with Dylan.
That we're in a situation where we're in the early phases of this Biden administration, yet the Democrats are still stuck with their obsession with Trump, because Trump is the only thing they can use to justify their inability to deliver on the material goods that people are going to demand. Biden is already showing that he's backing away from any semblance of materialism, calling what he's about to govern with austerity, because he's saying that he wants to go big. Yeah, he's talking about going big, yet all of the progressive demands that would help people, student loan reform, $15 minimum wage, et cetera, he's already backing away from or saying won't be possible. So, the $2,000 check is going down to $1,400. He's already talking about means testing that check, so some people who got it before won't get it now. So we're seeing this backtracking already. In 2022, we're going to have the midterms. I think that if the Democrats aren't able to deliver in terms of material benefits, they might lose either the House or the Senate again. So what I'm saying is that what exactly are we witnessing right now? Are we in a stage where, Biden is holding water until something that can actually be worse than Trump comes into power? Or some people are saying that if COVID subsides, we're going to have an economic boom that will carry Biden into a re-election, as if Biden will be able to be reelected. Most people are expecting that Kamala Harris will step up. Now, I know we don't want to limit our discourse on this show to electoralism, but what I'm saying is that we've spent so much of the post-Obama presidency trying to rationalize these Democrats until Trump gets in power and he's the boogeyman. What exactly what is the setup here since the material crisis of capitalism is becoming more evident, from COVID to Texas to the weather crises we're seeing across the board? So the question I'm asking is, people who are commenting on what's going on politically in society, which is what we are, is what exactly should we be preparing people to expect in the coming months and years, now that the quote-unquote savior's in power as being Joe Biden that he's supposed to be?
Oh, shit. I mean, I think, first of all, I don't know, we can't expect much, right? I think understanding that most of the people in the United States are now just leaning into Joe Biden because of Trump. And yeah, that's the thing, is I think it's there just needs to be more a concerted effort, and I don't know, it's hard. It's hard. What you're describing is the maddening conundrum that is the United States, where it's people use language that leads you to believe that there might be some type of movement, or there might be some type of progress, but at the end of the day, what happens behind closed doors and a lot of bureaucratic bullshit, we end up with nothing, or we end up with straight oppressive conditions. So yeah, I
there were people
I don't know. It's hard to even answer.
There were folks who were making the argument that during the George Floyd protests, that America was facing a moment of insurgency. All right. That, we had more protests in this country than any other time we've had since the 60s. We had urban rebellions going on. We had Black Lives Matter, et cetera, et cetera. And there were people who were literally saying that at that moment of time, we were in a moment of insurgency. And now the question I'm asking to you gentlemen, who are all, students of politics and global affairs and what's going on in the world, is that have we shifted from a moment of insurgency to a moment of surrender and complicity?
That's okay. So can I in a friendly way try to maybe reshape the question just a little bit, because I don't think it's necessarily a shift. I think to be vulgar and plain about it, I think the sellout was already happening. Look, okay, as a student, as an activist, as an organizer, as a teacher, what's always interested me has been what's on the margins of the movement that gets identified by mainstream corporate media as the mass movement. It's usually the shit that's on the margins that often gets disavowed by the actual or de facto leadership of that mass movement. It's oftentimes the shit that gets disavowed by that de facto leadership that interests me the most, because it shows the most potential for authentic, transformative vision, creativity, rebellion, community building, sustainability in a radical, revolutionary kind of way, and that kind of thing. I'm thinking about everything from Occupy to the emerging movement against the prison industrial complex in the late 90s and early 2000s, to this kind of current period that folks are referring to as Black Lives Matter, and which I think exceeds Black Lives Matter. And I'm going to talk about Black Lives Matter in a second, because I know y'all have been thinking and talking about this for several weeks now in an intense way. But what I mean when I say that the sellout was already happening is that what I think is different about this historical period, in contrast with the 1960s, is that you have a non-state apparatus, that thing I called earlier, the nonprofit industrial complex. You have this intertwining of liberal think tanks, liberal philanthropic organizations and foundations, the Ford Foundation, the Mellon Foundation, the Soros Foundation, we go on, Rockefeller Foundation, go on down the line. And you have all those things that have some kind of relationship with the Democratic Party also, right? So you have this network of organizations and apparatuses that are always in operation. And those fuckers are always trying to identify how to insinuate themselves into these movements, into these mass movements, into what we're talking about as insurgency, as rebellion, as revolt. That shit was already happening as soon as people took to the streets in June 2020.
Well, you can make the argument that the quote unquote Black Lives Matter network had already interfaced and was already being subsidized by those mechanisms before the insurgent.
So my good friend Pascal said it, not me. Right. So you said it, not me. So this is already happening.
So let me ask you a question. I mean, this is going to, this might hit some people hard. Is what we saw over the summer, a liberal elite color revolution to basically get Trump out of office?
Part of it, yes. And part of it were people that were ready to burn down police cars, police stations, and abolish the police. That's what I'm saying, right? Is that it's not one thing. What you have is an attempt to kind of galvanize a mainstream to it. That's an overused term, but like people that, there's all these organized forces that are trying to create a mainstream to it that makes it somewhat legible and respectable and comprehensible, and therefore in some kind of dialogue with, in this case, the Democratic Party, in this case, the elections of 2020. That's what was happening. That's the disciplining that was happening to what went on throughout the summer of 2020. Now, when I went to the demonstrations here near me in downtown Riverside, it was thousands of people. It was thousands of people from all over the place. It had nothing to do with any of the stuff that you saw on CNN, MSNBC, or even Democracy Now. Nothing to do with that. What I saw represented front and center was a Black radical abolitionist position on policing and state power. That's what I saw. And Black Lives Matter folks were there, but our local chapter of BLM Inland Empire just made an announcement just a couple of weeks ago that they're leaving the BLM rubric, the BLM network, for the same reason that those 10 other organizations left it a couple months ago, right? Because of the lack of accountability, financial and other forms of accountability from the BLM global network. I'll say one more thing about this, y'all. Just because it just disappoints me so much. This award that Alicia Garza just accepted from a right-wing Zionist organization that proclaims so-called Jewish universal values.
Didn't she reject it though?
Look, I'm saying like I think after there was blowback, right? But my point is that this thing, the fact that it's happening, right? The fact that you have a right-wing Zionist organization making the gesture, and that there has to be external pressure to create a response is a symptom of the problem. That's the symptom of the problem. And this is not an organization that is in any way secretive about what its agenda is, right? But when what we're talking about is this kind of mainstreaming of what I think authentically comes out of a Black radical tradition, that shit's always happening. And it's always happening in ways that it wasn't happening 50 years ago. That's the problem. That's the problem. So I think that's the question gets more complicated, because then it's not like there's one moment where things shift. It's like that insinuation is always happening from the beginning. So it's like the level of scrutiny and analysis and vigilance that people have to have is like it's constant. It's constant. It doesn't go away.
Yeah. All right. I think I'm ready to jump back in now. As far like what will this time bring? You know, like understanding that like there's a huge group of people that are going to be really, really fucking disappointed within the next 6 to 7 months. And I think if we're talking about like the proverbial we, i.e. like we'll turn like, hey, like maybe a dedicated smaller minority left that's being able to pull a broader movement along. That's something, I think that we need to have these conversations now to make sure like we can do what we can to have that actually be the shift, so that we're actually seeing some change. So like, not that Biden's going to do anything, but there needs to be a refocus on what's possible going into 2022. And so I think there's a larger group of people now saying we can't go to sleep than when Obama came into his presidency. And, you know, there's some people saying, hey, Black people, go to fuck to sleep. We can't ask for demands. But also, too, is just have this large group of the liberal class that just says, like, hey, Black man got elected, so what else do you want?
Well, so I got an email or a message sent to me from someone, and this doesn't happen to me. And they had saw something I posted on Jacobin. Jacobin wrote a whole article, and I sent this to Pascal. I didn't send it to Marcus, and I didn't send it to Dylan. I should have sent it to you guys too. Basically, Jacobin wrote a piece saying that Judas and the Black Messiah is this great movie. For those people that found the show through me being on Ben Burgess's show, which Pascal is going to be on Monday, I made my critiques about the film. Pascal had his critiques about the film. So someone sends me a message because Jacobin says it's like a great movie and leftists should watch it. So I just posted the show Pascal and I did. Someone sends me a private message and says, hey, I know the writer of that movie, and it's not Shaka King. He's like, Shaka King wrote like 50 words in that, and it's this white guy that has no politics whatsoever. And they're cashing in on BLM. And that was the whole purpose. These guys tried to get a movie bought. It wasn't going to get bought, so they hired this dude that I'm related to through marriage to write this script.
Well, I mean, one of the questions that we asked in our podcast we talked about is that what exactly does it mean that this movie, Judas and the Black Messiah, is being made at this time of when, quote unquote, you know, not to be pejorative, racial grievance discourse is hot and in chic. And what exactly, and this is a question I've asked before, is that why exactly in this quote unquote settler colonial white supremacist project is the American ruling class so interested in tolerating racial grievance through the liberal chattering class, its media, its publications, financial institutions bankrolling them, multimedia platforms like Netflix, Amazon Prime showcasing shows, giving money to financial to institutions like black colleges. If this is supposed to be such a racially recalcitrant institution called the United States of America, this quote unquote white supremacist settler colonial project LLCTM, as we like to use so much, then why exactly is there such interest in flowing capital to this racial grievance discourse at this moment? I would argue that it's a twofold project. Number one, the first part is that it helps delegitimize the reactionary Trumpian project, number one. And number two, it works as a means of delegitimizing the class-based politics that were being demanded by the white left vis-a-vis the Sanders agenda. So now it's always more effective for the ruling class to give out its racial fatback and biscuits to a contained minority that it's always been able to manipulate through its political class, while denying remedies, particularly in the age of COVID, to the majority of American society under the guise of racial reductionism.
Yeah, no, that's something that like in our short conversation that we had.
To jump in and talk about this, man.
No, go ahead. I got something. Go ahead, Mark.
Oh yeah,
I got something for your ass.
but that's like I don't know. I guess like moving forward, that's the question. Like we're literally in that space of like how we deal with the movie, how we deal with the movement, how we just talk about and actually try and organize our communities. Like I guess like yeah, we're in the time now of just answering the question of like actually where does this go? And by the 2022 midterms, like you will largely see is like it's if there's I guess like we could I'm thinking of Jamal Bowman as like a possible spectrum of things that could happen. Either he is a person that's able to leverage his popularity to get more people elected that are not really just like obviously he's a black dude, but just speaking of issues that actually affect poor class people. Does he win? Does he go on and help, or is there a slide back within the Democrats? And that's, I guess, what I'm scared. I'm super nervous of is that there's just going to be too many liberals that are going to go back into the third way politics, and then end up sliding back.
So first, let me start with a confession. Because, and I blame you all. I blame This Is Revolution. I blame you. I listened the other day to your discussion of the film, Judas and the Messiah, and I have not been able to get myself to watch it yet because you know why? And here's the other reason why. Because I was paying so close attention to the clips that you all were showing, a lot of which I think did you pull a lot of those from the Murder of Fred Hampton documentary?
No, I got those from there's a thing that came out last year. It's
the other one. Okay.
Yeah. That.
So I'm still like the thing I keep thinking about is that documentary, The Murder of Fred Hampton, which I show in a couple of my there's a couple classes I teach. I show it all the time, right? And it resonates with the right kind of students. It resonates with them in ways which are very present tense. So I can't get the documentary, The Murder of Fred Hampton, out of my mind. I can't get y'all's conversation about the Netflix movie out of my mind. I promise I'm going to watch it in the next 24, 48 hours. I was going to watch it this weekend. So I'm like caught off guard, not having done my homework and being pulled into the live stream today. However, what I will say is that Pascal's onto something in talking about or raising the question, the puzzlement about why the discourse and the kind of cultural politics of grievance, of racial grievance, particularly of Black people's grievance, is so
popularized.
The why it's so available to be capitalized right now, to be monetized right now, to be turned into things like this film on Netflix. And I think, in addition to what Pascal said so brilliantly, I also want to emphasize how the notion of grievance limits the horizon of politics to, at the very best, casualty management that is managed by the state. That's what the language of grievance does. And if you are thinking about a long historical condition in which specifically anti-Black genocide is fundamental, then one of the best things that could be done to reproduce the subjection of Black people and others to the logic of genocidal oppression and proto-genocidal oppression, all the different ways that shit happens, right? Because genocide is a logic. It's not just in a kind of outcome of mass killing. It's also a logic, right? It's about liquidating and neutralizing people on a large and strategic scale. If you're talking about that kind of logic, then one of the best ways to reproduce the power relations that flow out of that is to limit the discourse to a discourse of grievance. If it stays within the discourse of grievance, it can be managed. Right. And then this is the same thing with electoral politics, by the way, right? At best, electoral politics is casualty management. I think that's why a lot of people I really respect and continue to respect were pushing, for the Biden-Harris ticket. They knew and they know very well who Biden and Harris are, right? But they were trying to figure out, like, how can we have a little bit more room to breathe here, right? How can we it was casualty management kind of shit, right? Mm-hmm. But the problem, of course, is always that can constantly slip. And I'm talking about the grievance thing too. It slips constantly into actual ideological political counterinsurgency, meaning that, as Pascal mentioned, it actually undermines, the collective radical abolitionist creative work that people are doing, in the neighborhood, on the street, in community with each other all the time. That's the problem. That's what grievance does.
Yeah, I don't know. I agree with that. I agree with all that. And that's something that's like. No, I learned. Definitely, like you brought something new, just in the sense of saying, what are the end state of even focusing your politics in grievances, and like it's only going to be afforded to like a response to whatever that grievance is. Hey, you hit me in the leg with a baseball bat. Well, there's going to be a cast. There's going to be, some ibuprofen, and then, oh, hey, maybe you got to pay for the bills or whatever. But like nothing, if I have to say, hey, I want, like, what's the way to make my legs the strongest possible? If I'm only dealing the terms of the broken leg that Dylan gave me, then I'm not actually talking about strong legs. I'm just talking about fixing an illness or fixing an ailment. And then we take it to, the larger state of Black politics. It's just arguing to try and have Black people treated fairly. But that focus, that hyper focus, is something that the overall ruling class will utilize to subjugate the movement. Is that, and like, I don't know, does this also tie into that documentary, the Adam Curtis documentary, the individualism? I don't know.
I want to say this real quick, and then I'll leave it at that. We don't have a moderator for this chat. So there's no one going in and moderating what people say, because for the most part, this community that we've created, because of the show that we do, is pretty good. The chat's been going pretty fast, and I can't moderate as much as I like. When you see me off air, it's because I'm trying to get in and comment with you guys, or also cue a clip up. So I definitely haven't been following what's going on, and somebody's calling somebody a racist and this other shit. I got into a discussion with Zero Books Doug Lane. I said that I thought Adam Curtis was a little racist on this last documentary. He disagreed. We had a very civil back and forth on that, because there's an understanding that I'm not trying to cancel Adam Curtis for what I felt was a racist portrayal of the Windrush generation of Notting Hill in the UK in the 50s, and his use of a certain character, but it ended up being a civil disagreement. And I don't understand exactly what's happening on here, but whatever is happening on here, we're not talking about reverse racism. So I don't know what happened on the chat, but chill out. And I'm done talking about that.
Okay.
Chat is too much. It's too much. This is supposed to be about a bigger left project, and we can't have it if motherfuckers is fighting over silly shit.
That's the left. That's the left, though, isn't it?
No, I mean, listen, it's really interesting, and I want to, I'm glad Dylan is here, right? Because when Margaret was on, we talked about how not only factions of the liberal establishment and chattering class to the left chattering class were giving grief to certain, particularly left figures who weren't screaming with their head off, Trump is a fascist, Trump is a fascist, you got to vote for Biden, calling them the Trumpian left, the left flank of Trump. Some people would say, oh, they're interested in a red-brown alliance, blah, blah. This discourse is circulating, et cetera, that if you were not adequately distinguishing Trump as the greatest manifestation of quote unquote white supremacy, LLCTM, in the world. And I say that not to be pejorative, but I think that term is actually losing force because it's applied to everything, quite frankly. All right. As a man who wrote a book about white reconstruction, I'm asking Dylan.
Dylan literally wrote the book.
Do you think that this focus on Trump gave too much leeway or power to the liberal center to basically do nothing? And do you think too much is being made? Or maybe do you think that the leftists, particularly the black left, who don't focus on Trump's quote-unquote fascism, are wrong? Or do you think those who over-focus on it are wrong? What is your position on that?
I think Trump was a gift to the multiculturalist, the surviving multiculturalist Obama liberals.
Yep.
I think Trump was a gift because what it did is it invoked a romantic, nostalgic, kind of organizing platform for everybody going all the way back to the Clinton liberals, right? That's what that did. It turned that entire proto-post-racialist movement into a kind of leading force that could, number one, disavow Bernie Sanders, who, whatever you think of Bernie Sanders, they could disavow Bernie Sanders and legitimate. You remember, Joe Biden was getting his ass kicked in the Democratic primaries. And I think he understood and he knew, and his advisors figured this out he got the whole group of analysts and advisors. They knew all along, all he had to do was enter that Democratic primary and it would sweep to him because he was carrying with him the scent of Obama, right? So I think that, number one, I don't think there could be such a thing as an over focus on Trump, right? I think maybe what is lacking is a clarity of analysis about Trump and what the Trump movement was based in and what it will continue to do. I think it was an authentic white nationalist populist movement that's not reducible to the persona of Donald Trump. So I think it's more of a lack of a clarity of the analysis. I think part of that lack of clarity is to think about how Barack Obama, and I think I wrote this in the book, I think about Barack Obama and Donald Trump as estranged cousins. They are part and parcel of the same continuum of anti-black, racial colonial, settler colonial, heteronormative, patriarchal. I mean, they're part of the continuum of managed and reproduced state violence that is directed at particular populations all the time. Like I said, they're estranged cousins. Don't get it twisted, right? I'm not saying they're friendly. I'm not saying they're the same. That is not what I'm saying. I'm saying they rest in the same continuum. And so when I say that the rise of Trump, the ascension of Trump was a gift to that other part of the continuum, what I'm saying is that it authenticated and provided added notions of respectability to their positions, right? To the normalized ways that they reproduce these forms of policing state violence, of carceral state violence, of imperial state violence, of neoliberal state violence, and corporate violence. The agenda has turned into, can we please return the United States to respectable forms of oppression?
Yeah.
Right? To respectable forms of global domination, rather than this kind of ugly, shitty uncle kind of shit. Yeah. So so Trump was a gift to these people, right? Because it pulled a lot of the folks that we love. It pulled a lot of our folks in to that, to that moment. No different than Obama. No different than the Obama moment, really. But now it's Biden.
I mean, my position is that I saw a lot. I mean, I actually I chilled in the whole. I saw people whose analysis I respected, who I thought who I believed, I still kind of believe, were serious people on the left, not even some liberals, they lost their minds during the Trump presidency. What I mean lost their minds, they were either paralyzed with fear, paralysis, just absolute, their analysis went off, just all kind. I mean, I remember when Trump got elected, people say, "Oh my God, I'm terrified." And I mean, the reason for me, for me, I mean, listen, I am not trying to mitigate or deny the fact that Trump animates a legitimate reactionary white nationalist segment of American society. There's no question about that. But we can't act like that segment of American society has not been animated for 20 years, going back at least to the 90s, maybe to the 80s. I mean, we have Ruby Ridge, we have, all of those other things that started under Clinton. Trump is an extension of a reactionary white nationalism that has been going on for a long period of time, that I think he stumbled on using anti-immigrant zealotry, and embraced purely because of his own narcissistic ego. To answer the question, I've said this on the show before, people ask us like, why don't you think Trump is a fascist? I said, Trump doesn't have the ideological discipline
I agree.
to be a fascist. I'm not saying that Trump doesn't appeal to fascist elements. I absolutely, listen, the alt-right, which is a phenomenon that came alive during Trump's power, is filled with fascist elements. The fact that you have all of these individuals talking about, biological racism, IQ, eugenics, all of that discourse becomes alive during Trump's
It comes alive though at the end of Obama too. We have to keep in mind that a lot of that, the resurgence of the bell curve, Sam Harris, the new atheist movement, a lot of this is second term towards the end of Obama that we really get that big.
I mean, part of this, right, is a phenomenon that I've talked about. I think Dylan's probably is aware of. Is the paralysis of centennialism, which is the notion that capitalism every 100 years has to find a way to carry itself into a new millennium. We're still early enough into the millennium where the crisis of capitalism and how it will figure its way into the 21st century is being determined. And if you look at all of this discourse, anti-immigrant zealotry, eugenics, white genetic fear of survival, scientific racism. This is a direct replication of the same discourse that happened at the beginning of the 20th century, from the late 1800s to the early 1900s. The same discourse was being circulated again in terms of trying to determine how capitalism was going to be carried into the 21st century. It took a genocide with the Holocaust and 2 wars for them to go through it. But the question again is that now that we're in a position where we have a millennium, we have the 21st century in front of us now, the same type of discourse becomes circulated, right? And Trump is simply a manifestation of a declining capitalist state, increasing precarity, cross-racial suffering that is now feeding on those tensions. But for some reason, it denies anyone a clarity to understand that this has been part of the American project for over 100 years, and people literally lose their composure.
Yeah. Well, I think there's.
Go ahead, man. Go ahead.
Yeah, there's just some issues, and like not to like. Trump is, like what you said was like, he does not have the discipline. I don't even think there's like just the intellectual ability to be a fascist. And I'm not giving credibility to like people fucking losing their mind. Just speaking to like a very fucking real danger is that with Trump comes Steve Bannon's, Eric Prince's, Stephen Miller's into places of legitimacy that they didn't have before. And so yeah, and that's the type of the thing though too. It's like that, like a lot of the things that that those people were able to change within government have been now like doubled down on by Biden.
Now,
So even to point to give you a point that it's ridiculous.
That I can understand. I think that Trump, who as I stated, I don't think he had the ideological dedication to implement fascism. What you're saying is that in his buffoonery and complete lack of dedication to a project, he incorporated elements who clearly had the capacity to be dedicated to that project. I, for a long period of time, felt that the person who had the potential to implement the clearest fascist agenda, if he was dedicated to, was Steve Bannon. Yes. I felt that Bannon early on was probably one of the most noxious figures in the
diabolical. Like the motherfucker is diabolical.
I think both parties are legitimately frightened of Steve Bannon.
Yeah,
you got that other Stephen Miller too, though.
Stephen Miller too, yeah.
He lasted.
Exactly. Stephen Miller was there every single day of that administration, and you see it
lasted 4 years.
Yeah.
So I mean, listen, I'm from New York. Donald Trump is a guy who in the 70s was going to Studio 54, dancing the disco, snorting cocaine, looking forward to having sex with black chicks. All right.
Sounds like a party.
So what I'm saying is that this is a con game for this guy.
Yeah. 100.
But it worked because the material conditions for the con to pay off worked. He can't run for president and have the same effect in 2008 that he has in 2015 and 2016.
But it doesn't matter, because here's the thing that folks missed out on in the lead up to 2016 is that white nationalism fueled by anti-blackness crosses all political ideologies.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, not only does it cross them, it constitutes them. It is the condition of possibility for political ideology, period. You can't have political ideology in the United States. I'm talking about electoral, the political ideology that sustains electoral politics, right? You don't have the political ideology that reproduces electoral politics without the indispensable condition of white nationalism or multiculturalist white nationalism, right? Because I say that all the time because I live in an area here in Southern California where a good number, maybe close to half of the people I know that are devoted Trumpistas, are non-white people.
No, this is very important. And I told this to someone. I said, listen, one of the things that's fascinating about Trump is his capacity to bring forth a multiracial coalition of potential fascists.
Anti-blackness is multiracial.
Yeah.
Anti-blackness is multiracial. So let me say that, right? The misogyny, crosses everything. And it's also, misogyny is not limited to men, to cisgender men.
Again, I want to make this clear. I'm not saying that Trump didn't have, first of all, Trump rises in a moment in which the global reactionary right is already setting a stronghold in the world in Europe. You have UKIP in Britain, you have Front National in France, you have the Golden Dawn in Greece, you have the League in Italy, you have the Brexit phenomena. Trump is actually a later iteration.
Hey, don't forget Duterte in the Philippines. Come on now.
Duterte in the Philippines.
Bolsonaro.
You have Bolsonaro, which comes on after Trump. You have Modi in India. We're having this rise of reactionary nationalism that gets born after the 2008 crisis and the austerity movement of global center poles to deny the citizenry state resources in exchange to bankroll capitalist failure in 2008 and cause crisis. Compounded with Obama's immigration crisis by, completely carpet bombing the Middle East that floods Muslims into Europe, it increases this reaction, this reactionary anti-immigrant zeitgeist, combined with the economic precarity that gives birth to this that allows this existing latent white reactionary politics to explode. Trump happens after that phenomenon in Europe. So again, to be intellectually honest, yes, Trump is part of a continuum of an expansion of white reactionary nationalism that starts as a consequence of the failure of capitalism from the 2008 economic crash.
Yeah.
But does that mean that the complete, just outrageous, all on board, we need to have a united front against fascism tone? Because if you look at the right-wing project in Europe, it's kind of collapsing in the wake of the COVID economy.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, as of right now, like, I think the danger though is like the people who are in the I guess best opportunity, and when you talk about the Democrats in the US, you talk about it, the Labour Party in the UK, the people who are in the best position, in the most suited position to actually solve the fucking problems are woefully inadequate to do so. And like, this is where like Joe Biden, I mean, like I don't know if Keir Starmer and Joe Biden, that's like they're like Benjamin Buttons of each other, like one end, you know, of the movie, and they're gonna fuck it up, because yeah, absolutely, the UK, they had everything, like they had almost gone completely full into whatever the Tories had wanted. You got Brexit, you got fucking Boris Johnson. They're pushing these huge defense bills during a pandemic, while simultaneously trying to cut their national healthcare system. And then Labor comes back and says, we should kick out Jeremy Corbyn. Like it's so this is where it's, if you're in the United States and wonder, hey, why does the Democratic Party suck so bad? There is a broad range of like neoliberal shit politics that, yeah, it's more likened to a distant cousin to the baby fascists than actual opposition party.
And people who normally have sane politics are actually appealing and buying into the reactionary white nationalism because they are so tired of being ground to dust by neoliberal, left-governed neoliberalism.
But here's the thing, and maybe this is where we have a subtle but maybe productive way to talk about a analytical difference. I keep thinking, I'm constantly thinking about what Cedric Robinson means when he defines racial capitalism for us, right? And I think people coming back to this term, I actually think that a lot of the folks I hear using the term haven't actually read anything by Cedric Robinson yet, right? And because when people say racial capitalism, what they oftentimes are actually saying is not what Robinson meant. The way it's commonly being used, that way I hear it being used now, is it's like capitalism plus racism also, right? That's not what Cedric Robinson meant when he defined the term racial capitalism. When he said racial capitalism, what he's thinking about is how essentially racial war, right? The animus and the violence of racial war is part of what actually constitutes the rationality of capitalism. It's what constitutes the calculations and algorithms of capitalism from its foundations to the present, right? So in that sense, if we think about 2008, 2009 financial collapse, it's a moment in the life of racial capitalism that animates a particular form of racial warfare that makes it possible both for Obama to win the presidency and then Trump populism to rise to the fore. They're part and parcel of that same logic that underlies the reproduction of capitalism, which is the production and then the management of the violence and irrationality that comes with the kind of the racial ordering of the capitalist foundation. I mean, and that's never gone away, and that's also why it's multicultural, right? That's also, but part of what racial capitalism also does in a certain moment in its life is it starts to solicit broadly, right? Where it's not necessarily apartheid and exclusive to white people European descent, right? That there's a kind of selective and strategic invitation to other peoples who previously would have been excluded, and rejected by kind of classical white supremacist logics to actually participate in the machinery of racial capitalism. I mean, that's I think where we're at, and it's both Obamaism and Trumpism. It's together. They're like this.
Well, see, I mean, this is the thing, though. I agree with you that they're continuums, right? But I think that for me, my basic view, I see Obamaism or the rise of Obama as liberal capitalism in the crisis of capital, using identity and multiculturalism to mask that crisis. In other words, in the rising diversity of America, the browning of America, what better way to get the segments of the country that are most adversely affected by a crisis of capitalism to celebrate the austerity grounding them to dust than put one of their own at the helm of empire? So, I mean, not to sound like, Obama was a glorified psyop, frankly, in my analysis, not to be conspiratorial,
I guess, well, my question is it something that's like between Obama and Trump, or is it something that's like can be like extrapolated to like the international stage? Because
I think you get Trump because Trump is Trump. You can't take Trump out of the context of the rise of the reactionary right globally. Number one, Trump and that rise is a consequence of the neoliberal global management that was happening from 2008 to 2016, implementing austerity and being unable to deal with the contradictions of capitalism that came forth after the crash, resulting in a reactionary white nationalist rebuttal with the rise of Trump and all these other factions.
All right. What I'm saying to that, so your description is 100%, right? What I'm saying to that is that racial capitalism is a global apparatus. Yeah. And so what you see happening in moments of crisis, like what you're describing, this last 13, 14 years, is a kind of movement within the algorithms of racial capitalism that begin to emphasize what Cedric Robinson would call racial war. I mean, that's what you're calling the rise of this kind of white nationalist, reactionary, eugenics, etc., movement all around the world, right?
The thing that's like very interesting, interesting to me though, is that like how that rise also feeds into, and like I think Dylan, you were pointing this out earlier, like leads into people who were normally like excluded, i.e. the Bolsonaro's, i.e. The Philippines, I can't remember. The Duterte, and even like now in Myanmar, where you had the commander in chief got his ass kicked in the election, but they just had a military coup. And not that the prime minister Aung San Suu Kyi was all that fucking awesome. She largely in that same realm of the neoliberal, just fake woke identity politics. Well,
her dad was like the head of the military for years. Right?
Yeah. She got a humanitarian award given and then taken back because of like the anti-humanitarian policies that she was putting forward. So
this is something that very rarely talked about, and I think we should be willing to go there. How a crisis of masculinity feeds into the politics of the rise of all of these reactionary politics.
Yeah, 100%. Yes, absolutely.
Interesting.
I think that might be the link, right? Because like obviously these monsters can't really codify on racial lines. Boris Johnson doesn't actually want to sit at the table with a Duterte or a Bolsonaro, but it's the fact that, hey, we are all strong men.
Look, global, especially global white masculinity is always in crisis.
Yeah.
From its very
always has been.
The point is well taken. I think it's like the point is accurate, but I'm saying its very structuring is that it has to defend itself against threat and crisis all the time. Both in the intimate sense of bodily integrity and sexual integrity and gendered sexual integrity, but also in the most abstracted sense of the state. right? If you want to really blow that up, I mean, that's what MAGA is. Well, that's what Make America Great Again really means.
Point.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, but I mean, it signifies what is fundamental to that structure, the structure of global white masculinity in particular.
Fascism is a cultural phenomenon before it's an economic phenomenon.
Yes. Which is why Trump can be an aspirational fascist and still be effective.
Yeah.
You know
well,
what I mean?
like, it is driving. I mean, Boogaloo Boys, Proud Boys.
Proud Boys, yeah.
They're putting it on the name.
You want more Boogaloo people.
And that's like something. It's like if you were actually if I was a fuck organization that was trying to lie to people about what we were, I wouldn't put boy in the name, right? Like the fact that they're just like out there, it's like literally like they're just leaning into it.
I mean, you look at Proud Boys. I mean, it's all about a revanchist masculinity.
Yeah.
You look at the manosphere. I mean, what is Jordan Peterson's project? Jordan Peterson is a man who has millions of insecure men who basically can't get laid, who can't get a job, who have no money, that's trying to culturally make them feel that their masculinity is divine and protected.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's what the whole project is.
Yeah. It's sad.
Because what has happened, right, is that with the rising precarity of capitalism, because we've had an increase in participation in the economy of women, capitalism realizing that it can pay women less will be willing to make men more redundant and have women be replaced economically. And this causes a crisis because men, assuming that they can replicate the traditional norms of patriarchy that allow them to be a head of the household, can't do it again. Can't do it anymore because women now have jobs. Women are now independent. Women now don't need you. As a result, this causes a crisis of masculinity. Guys can't get jobs, and they react by saying, I want mines like my grandfather had.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, all that though is it comes off the back of the ahistorical whitewashing narratives that are always fucking pumped in, and this maybe goes to the what Margaret was saying earlier about like how we are so propagandized, as a nation, and that's just like one of the larger things that feeds into it. But I don't know. I mean, like, I feel like we're saying some dope shit, and I don't really know where else to go with it because, like, as far as tying in just like these international aspects of how our own nation is feeding into. I guess the slowly temperature turn up towards a global fascism. No, it's extremely interesting. I don't think this has been brought to light too often.
Well, let me say this before Dylan comments. We've been going for over 2 hours. Generally, the stream starts to go to shit over 2 hours. That's a long time in general. This channel is not monetized, so we can't get super chats and tell you guys to stay on and keep giving us money. So this is all because Dylan and I are up early. Keep that in mind as well. We're both in California, so this is early for us.
It's like 9 o'clock.
Yeah. Oh, now it's 11. Yeah, we got up at
early.
9. Yeah. Well, I didn't have my kid here. You black motherfucker. And I appreciate the chat was off the hook, except for whatever beef y'all had. Margaret, thank you so much for coming in. Her book, Prejudicial. Margaret was one of the early people to come on my show when I was kind of transitioning from being a music show to way more political. And we definitely talked about her book, and I fucked with her by quizzing her on all these presidents. Dylan, thank you for coming on last minute. I hit you up. You probably got your PJs on.
I was listening, and I appreciate you texting me and telling me to get on.
I'm going to be on Ben. If people are watching here from Ben Burgess, I'll be on Ben Burgess' show later this evening, 8 o'clock Eastern time, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. If you're on his Patreon, we'll be watching Judas and the Black Messiah. Marcus and the Left Flank Vets. Do you have anything you're doing tonight, Marcus?
Yeah, tonight is our show, Saturday Night Sedition. And I do want to give a shout out to whoever commented on Facebook, Lucas Senesac. He's basically just giving us a commercial for Left Flank Vets. I was radicalized by the military when I realized that all the things people need could just be provided for them, right? And that's something that we get in the military, that like, hey, as soon as you get into the door, everyone's got a house, everyone's got food, everyone got everything they fucking needs. Yes, we do engage in imperialism. That is the fucking bad part of it all. But for people who are coming from low economic conditions, once it's turned on, it's hard to turn it off. And especially, you know, I was a Marine, so when you talk about being always faithful and never leave a Marine behind, why would I want to leave anyone behind? Why should society leave anyone behind? Right. And so if you have that already implanted into your head, where do you end up? Oh, shit, I'm a fucking communist. So, yeah, watch Left Flank Vets tonight. It's twitch.tv/Left Flank Vets, at Left Flank Vets, twitter.com. Then we also got a Facebook and Instagram that we.
And Marcus was recently on the Antifada. If you people here from the Droid Report, Jamie Peck from the Droid Report had Marcus and one of his co-hosts on. So his show is blowing up. It's really hard to get.
Doing okay.
Because once he gets Ben Dixon level, then I can't talk to him anymore.
No, I won't talk to you anymore. That's how it goes.
Speaking of black people moving on up, George Jefferson, aka Pascal Robert, will be on Ben Burgess' show Monday.
I'll be on doing Radigan. Doug Lane.
They're going to have a conversation about not Foucault, but it's like a Frankfurt
Marcuse and what's Matt Taibbi's piece taking down Marcuse, and then I'll be on Ben Burgess Monday night to chat.
And he'll also be talking about Dylan. Pascal's writing a book for Zero called
The Crisis of Black Politics, from Obama to Trump, and the Crisis of Black Politics. So
that's the working title. It's the working title. So that's what we're all doing, Dylan.
I see your mind churning, man. I'd like.
Oh, he's about to wrap the show up.
Okay,
he's about to close it out. That's why.
Well,
so we'll close it out with brother. Also, white reconstruction.
You gotta stop with that.
Y'all wrote books.
I enjoyed the "oh shit, I'm a fucking communist," by the way. At home, I'm gonna keep that in my back pocket. Well, I want to say that I'm doing something. I got invited to do something really cool coming up on Monday. I put the link in the YouTube chat, called Queer Approaches to Transnational Carcerality. I'm going to be talking with some badass queer and trans abolitionists, especially my good friend S.A. Smythe at UCLA, thinking about how trans and queer abolitionist leadership and politics and thought have animated this 21st century abolitionist movement. It's been really front and center in thinking about how abolition happens. And I think queer and trans communities have actually demonstrated abolitionist forms of community building and mutual aid and resistance and autonomy from policing and state violence. So that's coming up on Monday. I'm going to do that, and folks interested should just register for it. It's free. And then the thing that I was thinking about as I was listening to y'all talk is just how important it is to think through the necessity of mobilizing against and abolishing, that is destroying, white being. And I'm thinking about this because of all the shit happening in the chat, right? Which is limited to these kind of skirmishes around notions of reverse racism and whatnot. I'm not that interested in that discourse, because I think it's actually, the discourse itself has a counterinsurgent effect on what we do. I want us to think about and reflect on how everything we've been talking about orbits around the ways that the kind of global structure of white being, meaning the paradigm of what it means to be human, what it means to live a good human life, to have access to that which one should desire, is structured in the very kind of global white masculinity that we were just saying is always in crisis. That's what it is. The problem is that it is not limited to white people, and that we, meaning people like the four of us on this call, especially because we're men, are constantly being sucked into that structure and that paradigm of white being. We want to be that white being We want a piece of that action. You know, we want
I don't know about all that.
Yeah, I mean that's the struggle. The struggle is simultaneously against all of the structures and edifices of white being that are trying to pull us into its toxic orbit all the time. That's a hard struggle, but I think to the extent that we understand that it is part of what turns a lot of our loved ones simultaneously into people who support Joe Biden, support Barack Obama, and support Donald Trump. Right. If we're gonna think about electoral politics, it's the structure of white being that actually is also in need of abolition.
Dylan.
It's not just capitalism. It's not just the carceral state. It's also white being.
Is greed, empire, and avarice exclusive to whiteness?
No, it's not whiteness. I'm not talking about whiteness. I'm talking about a paradigm of human being. That's what white being is. And those qualities that you just articulated are fundamental to white being.
Or are they not fundamental to power?
To the power that is articulated, but no, they're not. No, they're not. Because what we're doing right here is power. Right. So, but when you were talking about a certain kind of hegemonic global power, yes, right. To the extent that is part of the global project of civilization, and the abstracted human being, the human being that presides over that we don't talk about enough is that thing. It's that thing that I'm calling white being. And again, white being is a paradigm. It's not a person. It's not a specific population. It invites people like my guy Duterte to participate in all of its apparatuses and all of its paradigms of power and all of its conceptual structures. I mean, that's part of the issue. It's part of the problem. And we can trace that shit. That's what I'm saying, is that white being has an archive to it. So I'm not just making shit up here. Like, we can see how it is.
But my question is this: was the Mongol Empire engaging in white being?
No, man, because that's not the same kind of project that I'm calling civilization.
Power, mercenary murder, greed, empire.
There's been warfare, there's been tribal conflict, there's been regional conflict, but I'm talking about at the level of a global apparatus that seeks to impose a normative structure of human being. It's unprecedented. It's only with the arrival of white being that happens.
Is that basically how people understand like the overall, I mean, idea of white supremacy? You know, is that you know?
I think people usually think about white supremacy in way more provincialized and limited ways, right? I think they oftentimes think about it as extremist. I think maybe less. I think now maybe it's getting a little bit more sophisticated, and people think about white supremacy as a kind of logic of politics as well. But what I'm talking about is all the derivatives of the global project of conquest that we're living in the long half millennium of having inherited. Right. And that's what differentiates it from things like the Mongol, from other forms of empire. That's what I'm saying, Pascal. It's like there's empire, there's empires, plural, and there's empire with a capital E, which is the thing that we're still inhabiting and dealing with. And what I'm getting at is that empire has a proctor, an abstracted proctor. And that proctor of being is the thing that I think we have to also be at war with. Because it constitutes us. It toxifies us.
I mean, I honestly, like, as you're talking about it, I kind of had a more, I don't know, cloud-based idea, you know, of what white supremacy is, and like as starting as like the white supremacist project in the whole of starting something that's starting colonial times and then extending into now, and yeah, I don't know. Like,
we're together on that, Marcus. So we're together on that.
Okay, yeah, that's. I mean, when you're saying like white being, you know, like I was a little like confused. I hadn't heard that term before, but as you're describing, it's like I guess I had my own idea on like what white supremacy, like the white supremacist movement as something that has started colonial times and now pushed into you know the current area. And that was kind of what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, full transparency. That's what I'm trying to get at in that book that Jason keeps waving around in front of the camera. Like that's like one of the central argument or theses I'm trying to articulate in the book. I don't know if I'm doing a decent job of it here or not, but what I'm trying to get at is the figure of human being that sits as the proctor of white supremacy, right? Because white supremacy is not just it's abstracted thing. There's like a mode of being that sits behind it, right? And like what's fucked up about it is that it's not just limited to the Portuguese in 1492 anymore or whatever, right? It's not just that's the problem, right? It's like it actually has Duterte front and center. It has Bolsonaro front and center too. I mean, and that's what I'm saying is that this is part of what elsewhere in what I'm arguing, I'm calling multiculturalist white supremacy, right? Is that, white supremacy doesn't require white people to preside over it. I mean, they're still primary, but it doesn't require them to do it. That's why we have, the Lori Lightfoots of the world in Chicago, I keep thinking about.
Thanks, Obama.
I look at this as an extension of the product of empire that comes forth from the beginning of man's conquest of resource and humanity over man, and that what we see as a quote-unquote white being is a consequence of the European amalgamation of that power source over people of the global south, being brown and otherwise, but it has not stopped quote-unquote whiteness or white beings from destroying themselves or subjugating themselves in that process.
I think I could be with you on that, Pascal.
That's true. I don't disagree with that.
I just want everybody also to understand that, keep in mind that there are some fundamental, I shouldn't say fundamental differences, but, we may have differences of opinion when it comes to Cedric Robinson's Black Marxism, but there is no name calling here. We can talk this out as
yeah, I feel like we should
you know what I mean? Like this is how this stuff is supposed to go.
Let's just take a 15-minute break and then we'll do another 2 hours.
Well, at the end of the day, to me, the Bigger Left Project says I'm not going to, because I may not agree 100% with Cedric Robinson, I'm not going to cancel Dylan out of this left project because I don't agree with that aspect of that's just silly. That's just fucking silly.
And I think a lot of what I'm saying would probably be refuted by, by Cedric Robinson's students too. I don't know. I think it's probably.
Also, you saying if I had Robin D.G. Kelly on here, y'all would have beef?
I don't think so, man. Well, no, we wouldn't have beef. We'd have disagreements, but we're not gonna have.
That's the thing. We can have we should be able to disagree.
I love Robin, man. Like, no, I love all
the ultimate project we're engaged in is trying to create and architect a society that is humane, just, egalitarian, and beneficial to the environment, for humanity, the planet, and our progeny as well. It's a project based on trying to bring forth our better selves, to improve the condition of the human species.
Yeah, this is
devoid of the more malevolent aspects that we carry.
Yeah, to me, what Pascal's talking about is the project is a project of insurgent human being. It's a project of insurgent human being that is not normative, that does not try to mandate one particular way of being in the world. I mean, that's what's beautiful about having been working alongside abolitionist people for almost my whole adult life. Is I've been constantly educated in all these modalities of being in the world that are fucking relatively liberated, relatively autonomous under the most oppressive and violent conditions of duress. And I'm saying I've learned that from people that are incarcerated. I've learned it from people who are displaced and unhoused. I've learned it from colonized people. The ways in which community and self-sustaining liberated autonomy can be constructed, even under the most contingent way, in the most contingent ways, right? In the most endangered and vulnerable ways, under conditions of severe and acute state violence, even genocidal and colonial and anti-Black violence. That's what's instructive. That's what's instructive. And that's what I mean by the abolition of white being, right? Because you know what all this shit is? It's like taking the paradigm of guerrilla warfare to a completely different level, right? It means proliferated struggle. And it also, what it also means? It means that the grounds on which we are engaged with each other critically at the level of thought, ideology, politics, culture, aesthetics, all that shit, right, is more like what we see here than what we see over there on CNN or whatever, right? Like it looks more like this. The questions that are raised and the conflicts that we work through and think through and butt heads on looks more like this, something closer to this.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. That seems like something that we talk a lot about is that it's not. People want to talk about the Panthers being revolutionary and show a black person with shotgun shells streaming across their chest and a fist and a weapon. But what Dylan's saying is like what we were saying is like the actual revolutionary shit going outside of the conditions that the state is being put on you and saying we're going to feed every kid breakfast and lunch.
Yeah.
That's the revolutionary act right there.
And that's
self-defense is a natural thing.
Yeah.
But
that was my critique of the film, right? Because you miss in humanizing the snitch and in humanizing the FBI agent that hired not just that snitch, but like 9.
Oh, see, I'll say this, I haven't watched either, Dylan, so don't feel bad, right?
Okay, I don't feel bad.
I should have said something earlier, because and that's the thing is like when Pasquale and Jason said it, talked to earlier, and they were like, "Oh, there's not a whole lot of revolutionary politics in this shit." I was just like, "Well, I guess I'll get around to it," you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it feeds into a lot of what Pascal says about that I forget exactly what you call it, Pascal, off the top of my head, but when you talk about that era after the riots, where we started
the 50-year counter-revolution.
The 50-year counter-revolution and the politics of inclusion, right? So here, you black people over here rioting, why don't you dance on the Soul Train? Yeah,
and we're gonna kill a whole bunch of you in the meantime. That's the thing, right? The inclusion always is accompanied by war.
Yeah, and I don't know, it that movie for me, and I think Marcus hit the nail on the head. And I was on Burgess' show not too long ago. We were talking about RoboCop, and I brought this up again. If Full Metal Jacket and Platoon and all those movies of the 80s and early 90s are not anti-war films, but actually pro-war films, then Judas and the Black Messiah is not a revolutionary film. It is a counter-revolutionary film. It's going to sell a lot of T-shirts.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not going to make a lot of people pick up the Communist Manifesto because they never talk about it in the movie.
They mentioned the 10 points at all.
Say again?
Go through the 10 points.
No,
They talk about the Black Panther 10-point program, but they only mention like the last 3.
Yeah, they don't mention all of them. No. So that was my whole thing with the movie. I still want you guys to watch it because I'd love to hear you guys' take on it. Because at the end of the day, the movie is an entertaining film, but it is a Hollywood film nonetheless. I do want to end this show with this thing that I watched last night of Marion Barry. It's the FBI agent telling the story how he got the snitch to wear the wire, and it's really funny because if you hear him tell it, he gave this great speech about what it is to be an American, but in reality, it was like, "What motherfucker you're facing like 100 years? You don't need a speech. You threw 100 years on that motherfucker's shoulders," and he told on everybody because everybody tells.
That's American as fuck, isn't it?
Yeah.
Another thing about these movies, they got you thinking that fucking everybody is quiet. A good friend of mine that's a prison guard, has been a prison guard for 20 some years. We were talking about
he's a prison guard.
A good friend of mine is a prison
I gotta
guard.
go.
You said what you said?
I gotta go. I'm messing with you. I got.
It's one of them things, man. It's one of them things. If you are, I feel like if you're a black man, ain't nobody in your family a cop, I would look at you funny.
I know.
One of the jobs that we get with benefits. But he said, he said, "Look, man, I've been here for 20 some years. I met 5 people in my life that didn't tell."
Yeah.
Everybody snitches. But this shit is pretty funny about this man telling the story. And it also, I should say, it's funny that Marion Barry got caught smoking crack, but Marion Barry got caught smoking crack.
It's a little funny, I guess.
What's even funnier,
you just pissed off a whole DC audience.
I grew up in Northern Virginia, just outside DC. You have no idea how much anti-blackness that moment empowered for the people I was around in my entire childhood. And it's what turned me toward what you see now, by the way. So like I'm indebted to that in a weird, morbid, terrible way. But the way that one moment empowered so much anti-blackness, so much violence with the people around me that I don't think I can forgive Marion Barry for that.
That's it. I don't want to say like that's funny, but like the situation, the Marion Barry, like that, like
it's hilarious.
What's funnier than the crack shit actually is before the crack shit. Hey, before the crack shit, that fool was giving a speech and he was sweating so hard, he was sweating through his suit.
We knew Marion Barry as a sweater, though. We knew he sweated.
DC audience
Always saw Marion Barry was never not sweating. I respected that.
DC State Hood.
Hey, check what Dusty said. Dusty says, no mistake that Schindler's List was released during the Palestinian Intifada. I mean, it's a well-made film, but it's made for a material reason. I believe that in my soul. I believe that in my soul. After watching, and not to say that it took Judas and the Black Messiah for me to understand this. It's another film in the long list of films that don't really address real material conditions, right? And if Boys in the Hood doesn't address any real material conditions, and I always say Boys in the Hood is a commercial for 1994 crime bill, Judas and the Black Messiah is in that same vein of well done, good Hollywood film, a lot of action, but it's
I have a subtle disagreement with you here because I think there's a way in which films like this do directly address material conditions by way of aesthetic warfare.
Okay.
I think what films like this and Boys in the Hood, etc., what they are doing is they're trying to wage aesthetic warfare against the kind of Black radical revolutionary and abolitionist aesthetic that is coming out of rebellion, revolt, and insurgency.
So you're saying it's against. So I'm agreeing.
But I'm saying that's part of addressing a material condition. That when you're looking at a sustained year of rebellion against anti-Black policing, in which there is an aesthetic of rebellion that's about shit burning, right? That's about people gathering en masse, unapologetically, in principled, collective, beautifully creative opposition to a long history of anti-Black policing. No longer just one killing, right? It was never just about Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Tamir Rice going down the line, right? This is about a long history. That's an aesthetic movement, right? This is about the way things the way things appear, the way in which people experience beauty in their life, right? So when this shit goes down, when Judas and the Messiah, Boys in the Hood, etc., when these things go down, this is, in my view, this is part of an aesthetic warfare that is inseparable from the material condition. I don't know.
You're saying it's a warfare against the pushback.
It's a warfare against the rebellion. Yeah, it's an aesthetic warfare.
So I'm agreeing. I'm agreeing with you.
Counterinsurgency. It's aesthetic.
I'm agreeing with you because
I know you are, but I'm saying it's aesthetic counterinsurgency, and I think that's completely material.
It's fucked up, man. Because somebody says, and this is the first thing fucking Pascal said to me because I watched the movie like a day before him. He goes, "Do they mention Vietnam?" And I was like, "Nah." And somebody just said right here, "Do they mention Vietnam?" And I kind of want to be like, "Nah." Like you would think this movie took place in a world with just like badass Black people that walk around like, yeah, Jack, but not that bad. It's not that bad, but
you're saying I should expect a blaxploitation film when I sit down and watch it. That's what you're saying.
Good movie, man. It's a good movie, and that's why you shouldn't trust it.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
That's the best. There you go. It's a good movie, and that's why you shouldn't trust it. There you go.
That end it. Close it. That's the end. That's the end of the episode.
I tell people all the time, I have problems with Boys in the Hood, but I'll watch that motherfucker every time it come on regular TV.
Thank you.
But I got problems with that bitch. Same thing with New Jack City. I'll watch that bitch every time it come on regular TV.
That's my top 3 right there.
Oh man,
you wouldn't want to be a.
Hey, New Jack City has quotes that we still say amongst my friends. So let me play this clip of this very. I'm also going to play it, and you guys are still going to be on air. So you can comment on this FBI agent talking about.
Oh man.
Yeah. It's a good one. Just look at this cat right now. Look at him. Just snitchy McRat. Look at this dude.
He looks like a professor at my university. He looks like a guy I know at my university.
Oh, he probably telling on you right now.
He is. He looks like a professor I know at my university who literally has the Department of Homeland Security symbol on his desktop as his desktop background.
Oh, Jesus.
That might be this dude.
It might be this dude.
I'm being totally serious. It might be this dude because this is like 20 years old. So this dude could be at your university right now telling on your ass. Watch your back.
And in front of Charles, and I talk about the men and women who died fighting for this country so that we would have the freedoms that we have. And at one point, I had everybody bow for a silent moment of prayer for the people who died fighting for the country. So I went over this with Charles Lewis, and then I brought it down to.
So he's saying that this is what he was telling the snitch initially to get him to confess, not the 100 years that man was facing on a dope charge in the Virgin Islands.
A football game, and he was the quarterback. And this is, we're inside of the 2-minute drill. And we were behind 4 points, so we had to have a touchdown. And we were the wide receivers, so he had to throw the bomb.
Lewis threw his long bomb. He talked for days about his involvement with Berry and cocaine. Now the investigators were ready for the sting. The federal prosecutors wanted Berry using drugs on videotape. They decided to set a trap for him, using very special bait, his former mistress and a one-time cover model, Hazel Rashida Moore. Moore had told the grand jury for the Romani Inn case
sweating
that
like a
she knew
motherfucker.
nothing about the mayor and drugs. But now she was in trouble. Moore was arrested in Los Angeles for drunk driving on New Year's Eve, 1989. When news got back to Washington, the FBI flew her back to the East Coast. There, Moore quickly agreed to help the government snare Berry.
She was down on her luck, to say the least, in California. She was living in a shelter. She had been a drug user and had been engaged in drug activities that had nothing to do with the mayor. It was difficult for the government to paint her as the saintly woman, because had she been a saintly woman, I don't think they'd have been able to use her as bait.
On January 18th, 1990, the undercover team laid a trap for the mayor, based on what they believed was his typical behavior. They booked Moore into room 727 of Washington's Vista Hotel. From there, she called Berry and invited him over. Berry was cautious, suggesting that they meet in the lobby. Moore said she just ordered room service, so Berry came upstairs. The sting had begun.
Berry knew he was going to get him some ass.
Oh man, I remember this.
In the planning stage, you want to develop a credible scenario. Is this the kind of transaction, is this undercover transaction, the kind of transaction that...
This is White Being right here, by the way.
...target has engaged in before?
This dude.
If you look at the tape itself, I think you would get a sense that the scenario that played out was not an extraordinary compulsion to Mr. Berry to engage in illegal conduct.
We had such a profile and description of how he react in certain circumstances that we were amazed at one point. It sounded like he was reading our strip. It was just hard to believe that it was happening the way that it was.
As usually
he really does like
pussy. Sting, the key civilian player was assisted
it's
and
just that simple
by an agent. An undercover FBI agent going by the name Wanda was in the room when Berry arrived. The original plan called for Wanda to sell Berry the crack personally, but Moore decided she could handle the operation alone. About 20 minutes after Wanda left, Berry asked Rashida about her.
You ever mess around?
Oh, Marion.
Yeah, sometimes. She didn't do a lot. She too much.
Look, he ain't even talking about coke. He's like
Moore had been instructed not to raise the subject of drugs. But she took Barry's question, which could have been about sex, as a drug reference, and told him Wanda tooted or snorted cocaine. Even if drugs were on the mayor's mind, it was clear that sex with Moore was also a priority.
The only priority.
That's why he
Howard
came
guided
upstairs to the
conversation
room.
Back to drugs. For a while, Barry declined, but soon FBI agent Wanda returned with crack for sale. After much deliberation, Barry told Rashida to buy the crack.
Oh, that's fucked up. Rock the
Still
vote.
cautious, the mayor tried to get Moore to smoke first, but Moore was forbidden by federal sting guidelines to take the drugs. Finally, the mayor put the crack in the pipe and lifted it to his lips. After 2 hits, the agents concealed in the adjoining room burst in on the mayor. Arrington sprinted to be sure he got to the mayor first.
And I grabbed him, and it was at that moment, you know, we're eye to eye, and I could see it in his eyes. He realized that he had been had. It's that moment of reckoning with the warrior when he sees defeat. And I've seen it many times from other arrests. And I felt at that moment that as if someone had stuck a knife in my heart and just twisted it. I was thinking, why did he have to be black? We don't need.
You knew he was the man.
He just figured that out.
Barry was
He
slipped
just
out of the
figured that
hotel
out.
to FBI headquarters.
That's
for
why
booking,
we can't
and
get
released
ahead as a
later
people.
that night.
Oh
Within an
shit!
hour,
We were
press
attacked. We were
understood,
going after a
and the
black dude this whole
questions
time.
He didn't know Marion Barry was black until that happened.
Like that's the biggest.
The mayor's arrest was certainly
Look at Bill.
spectacular.
Look at Bill
Every
Curtis.
sting must really do its stinging twice. Once for the arrest and once for the trial. That's because in high-profile cases like Barry's, the strategy for the defense is to put the government on trial. Inevitably, the question in the courtroom becomes this. Was the defendant predisposed to commit a crime for which the cops provided an opportunity? Or were the police so eager for an arrest that they virtually forced the defendant to commit a crime? Blaming the police is known as the entrapment defense. And when Marion Barry came to trial, his lawyers used it to come out swinging.
Once Washington Mayor Marion Barry.
Now, like, real talk. First of all, I love Bill Curtis, but that why did he have to be black shit is the biggest amount of bullshit I've ever heard in my fucking life.
That's a question they should ask about him.
Maybe that's what Marion Barry was saying as he.
That's
the question they should have asked about the Fed. That's the question they should have asked about the Fed.
Yeah, he got tackled. He's like, "Why is this black man arrested me? What the fuck?"
Like, you done brought this broad all the way from LA, from a homeless shelter in LA. You scraped her up off the ground to get him to smoke crack in a hotel room, and you over here talking about, oh, it just broke my heart that he was black.
Oh man,
Man, if you don't shut the fuck up,
yeah.
Locking up brothers left and right, giving a fuck.
Uncle Phil ass looking motherfucker.
Uncle Phil.
He had been arrested for smoking crack in a police FBI sting. His struggling administration became a shambles. Barry's defense team, led by attorney R. Kenneth Mundy, prepared to argue that the mayor had been
Right there, he
entrapped.
won my vote.
We'll enter a plea of not guilty.
While waiting for trial, Barry checked into a drug rehab center. Prosecutors, led by U.S. Attorney Jay Stevens, took the time to build a stronger case against the mayor. The sting actually helped them collect more witnesses against Barry.
Perhaps it was more important in the investigative stage than the trial stage. Mr. Barry had publicly denied time and time and time again that he had had any contact with, had any relationship
This guy's
to
got the devil
illegal
in his eyes.
narcotics.
Never in my lifetime
Lying-ass Marion
have I
Barry.
used any illegal drugs. I've said that over and over again.
Yes, you
The
have said
sting
that over and over again.
and the very tangible, visible images that were seared into the public's mind as a result of that sting undercut his ability to deny that publicly.
Armed with the videotape, the investigators could convince reluctant witnesses that the mayor could no longer be their protector. By the time Barry's former friends had finished cutting deals to save their own skins, the U.S. Attorney's Office had enough evidence for a 14-count indictment, 11 drug-related charges, and 3 counts of perjury. for lying to the grand jury in the Charles Lewis investigation. The Berry camp, meanwhile, was focused on
Another thing I appreciate about Marion Barry in the 90s is that he went bald with such grace.
The jury pool for this trial was made up exclusively of the mayor's political constituents.
The kind of people that would vote for Marion Barry in an election would be the same kind of people that would vote for him in a jury box. He's got his Achilles heels, and he even had those flaws when he ran for public office. But people still voted for him. So our jury consultant team consisted of really the same people that had been on his campaign.
The defense hoped that the 10 black, 2 white jury, who began hearing evidence on June 18th, would be receptive to the entrapment defense. Pleading entrapment is not the same as saying you've been trapped.
It was like a painting on like a fucking
the entrapment plea is really a way of blaming the investigators for pushing the defendant into committing a crime for which he had no inclination. Berry's team expanded the entrapment defense into a fierce attack on the government itself. It is the standard response to the sting.
In constructing an undercover, you need to be cognizant of that, because that is about
he looks shook right now.
You have left, and that is to try.
First of all, he looks like grown Wally Cleaver.
Overreaching,
and he looks hella shook.
I want to jump a Matchbox car off
somehow or
his
other,
hair.
the defendant has been victimized.
Defense attorney Ken Mundy had
That's
little
that
choice.
Fed hair.
The parade of witnesses and their long list of allegations involving the mayor and drugs were a catalog of prior drug use. Charles Lewis testified that he had smoked crack with Berry in 1986 and 1988.
What crackhead remembers when they smoked crack? That's what I want to know. I've been around a good amount of dope fiends in my 43 years on this
Doris
planet.
Crenshaw, a respected civil rights veteran and an unwilling witness, told prosecutor Richard Roberts that she had snorted cocaine and smoked crack with the mayor on several occasions. Unable to answer all the charges, Mundy picked one witness,
devastating,
a drug dealer who testified that
What'd you
the
say,
mayor
Pascal?
bought crack from her
Crack was
in
just
1989.
devastating to girls, man. Folks.
I mean, these are some high up people. I think they lied about the crack a little bit. I think they told the feds what they wanted to hear. Apparently, Barry was not a crackhead. Apparently, he was a cokehead, but he wasn't a crackhead.
The most possibly successful attack against. And I said, now look what we did to the Lydia Pearson count. Just think what we could have done to
Real
all those
crackheads
other
don't have
counts.
Rolodexes.
And so forth. And so we didn't try to answer the other counts directly.
The videotape from the sting itself was played in the trial's 5th week. Shocking as the images were, the charge from the Vista was only a misdemeanor. And the prosecution knew that the tape might also be a liability.
Frankly, we considered not charging that count at all, simply because of
this is the part I wanted to talk about.
As a
like, the tape was so bad that the prosecution at one point was like, we definitely didn't want the tape to be shown because, you know, we entrapped the shit out of this guy. Like, that's insane. That's all your evidence right there. Yeah. This is your entire case. You spent how much taxpayer dollars on cleaning up the fucking crackhead in LA, flying her over, housing her, feeding her, probably feeding her dope. And at the end of the day, you're like, well, you know, it didn't really go down the way we wanted it to. Because ultimately they wanted him to buy the dope from the first chick, and he was going to smoke the rock right away. And it's like, there you go. You wanted it. Case closed. And it didn't work out that way, because that, I wouldn't say Marion Barry knew what was up, but he just really didn't want to smoke crack that day. His goal was to screw his old under chick.
That tape is the parable of the U.S. government's conspiracy to deposit crack in black communities and other poor communities around the United States. That's literally a parable for that.
I mean, to me, it
the
also
conspiratorial nature of it. I mean, it's
to me, it looks like, you know, this episode I think we're seeing is from the early 2000s, so we're coming off the whole crack thing, right? Kind of, sorta, and if you remember during that era, crack was like the boogeyman, and everybody was supposed to be smoking crack, as if powder cocaine just didn't exist. And Marion Barry, just, it seems like he didn't even understand how the whole thing worked. I mean, if they would have had a freebase pipe there, that probably would have been a little different. But I don't know. This whole thing to me is very, very interesting. Yeah, somebody says crack was fading, heroin was big. Of course, heroin was big because, you know, in around the, I forget, 94, 95, Oxycontin hits the market, and it starts to be prescribed to people that don't have real bad injuries, toothaches. You know, that's why the Sackler family paid those hundreds of millions of dollars in that lawsuit that they're totally fine with paying.
Well, Oxy is the Rush Limbaugh drug.
That's what he was addicted. Was it Oxy? I thought it was other shit.
I think it was Oxy.
Was it Oxy? I don't know. I know he had, pretty much.
I'm glad he's dead. I hope it hurt.
And twice on Sunday.
As a point to generate sort of the empathy and sympathy for the defendant.
That was exactly what Mundy had in mind. When Rashida Moore took the stand, Mundy subjected her to a fiery cross-examination. Moore admitted that she had repeatedly urged the mayor to take drugs, although cocaine use had once caused him to suffer a heart attack.
You okay? Are you? You want to take another?
She chopping lines for him?
The very, very terrible mindset of Rashida Moore and her disregard for him as a person. When she knew of his history of having overdosed or almost overdosed, and she invited him and urged him, with the agents calmly standing by, to take another and take another.
To provide a sinister motive for the sting, the mayor himself pled his own case to his favorite audience, the public. A sharecropper's son from Mississippi and a civil rights veteran himself, Barry was a powerful mixture of charismatic politician and common man. It was a combination that had helped him win Washington's mayoral seat and hold it for 3 terms. Now he insisted that American justice is prejudiced against elected black officials and that he was the victim of a racist investigation by a white prosecutor.
Pascal, wait till they show him put on the
That's
Kente
David
clause.
Liar. The U.S. government is a liar. And Marion Barry and our defense team is David.
I think as a prosecutor, you need to be sensitive to the issue in terms of how it might play out, if it's a racial issue or any other kind of issue where there's some extraneous kind of factor at play. But at bottom, a public official who abuses his or her public trust must be held accountable, whatever race or ethnic origin or sex they may be.
Barry took to wearing an African-style kente cloth to court. Many in the black community in color-conscious Washington embraced Barry's race arguments. In the Barry case, right and wrong were blurred in the hazy light of the Vista videotape.
So Kente clause apparently absolves you of all your sins.
They were immediately deadlocked.
I didn't know that.
They got Nancy reelected.
Right? Nancy Pelosi gets the Kente clause.
The government.
Marion Barry gets a Kente clause. Pascal, did you know that?
Get this man.
No, I did not know the power of the Ghanaian Kente clause was so effervescent.
The opposite view, more or less, was that the mayor had performed criminal acts and that the government allowed him to do that.
The defense strategy had succeeded. Even for the Vista sting, the jury could not agree on a verdict. After 8 days, the jurors were stalemated, but both sides were stubborn, so they began to discuss a solution that would give everyone a little satisfaction.
My own guess is that within those discussions, informal, maybe back at the hotel, shall we say.
I'm really mad they couldn't have found any of the black jurors. They found the one white juror.
Some kind of compromise could be reached, and in fact, one was. The compromise
George
being one
Will's
guilty
twin.
count and one innocent count.
The jury acquitted the mayor on the charge related to Lydia Pearson, the one Mundy's defense had hit the hardest. And they voted to convict on the charge derived from Doris Crenshaw. On every other charge, including the 3 perjury felony counts, the jury hung. Barry and his supporters celebrated as if it were a victory. A felony conviction would have barred the mayor from public office for life. A misdemeanor conviction like Barry's rarely drew a prison
So,
sentence.
and I'll leave on this because I lied and said we were gonna hang up a half hour ago. Does this remind you a little bit of where we are right now with Donald Trump and the impeachment when it comes to wanting to get a conviction so he doesn't run again? Because Marion Barry became mayor again, and then in the 2000s ran again for city council position. So if Trump is the bad man, and you want the orange man gone, then is the impeachment of a greater importance than we think? I'm asking the question because I don't know the answer.
I would say no.
And
You know,
chat.
are we? Is that just a general question? And
It's a general question I'm asking you guys, and I'm asking the chat as well.
Okay. I would say no. Just because of there's just other things, right? So like impeachment is just a political process.
Mm-hmm.
You know, is there the stipulation that you cannot get elected again? Yes. But Donald Trump still has things ahead of him. Some of the stuff that he did, you know, as president, like there's, you know, indictments as far coming through as from Georgia as for the election tampering, I think, you know, somewhere along those lines. So I don't know. Yeah, I mean, like where the lines of, hey, if he doesn't get convicted, could he get office again? You know, yeah, I feel like there's similarities there. I think that there's just very different reasoning behind, who they went after and why. You know, especially like there's a big difference between Marion Barry and the shit Trump did. You know, like I could really give a shit if elected officials are doing cocaine, right? Like I don't care. Where are your votes at? You could smoke crack too. Where are your votes at?
I'm down to check it out. I'm down to check that documentary out.
I'm down with them doing whatever they want if they decriminalize it for everybody else too.
Yes.
Yeah.
That.
Smoke as much crack as you want, but you better release every fucking black person and every other person that you locked up and give reparations to all those people that you fucked up because you were locking them up for having crack in their pocket.
Yep.
You better do that. And
Is
fuck
that,
crack.
is that how he got reelected? Anyone that actually has some uncut Bolivian.
Oh shit.
The DC audience is gone.
Washington, D.C., the black people that I was around in Washington, D.C. identified with Marion Barry, warts, crack, and all. That's why he got reelected.
Yo, man, do you understand how popular Marion Barry is in D.C., man?
No.
Marion Barry put people to work. Marion Barry put black people to work when black people wasn't working and when nobody was fucking with black people in general. Marion Barry put programs out there that gave black people dignity.
That's the point, you know. That is the fucking point of it all, though. Is that like people don't and really shouldn't give a shit. Being a politician is a fucking job. It just comes with a public resume or a public fucking interview process. You know, this like I don't care, right? If you show up and you do your job, like then people will rehire you, i.e. right here with Marion Barry. And like that's where like politics though
back and biscuits all day long.
But that's where with politics is that you can get by on the politicking of the name, right? If you just, hey, I gave 3 people a job, but on my commercial there's hundreds of DC people that have gone back to work because of Marion, you know, that's where perception can be reality.
Because there's another documentary about Marion Barry that talks more about his election coming back, running for a city council position, and that was really interesting because they actually found the black men that he employed during this campaign, And that's like the first thing they said. They were like, he gave us dignity. And he's a fat back and biscuits black political misleadership class ass motherfucker. It gets
well,
no.
some people would call him the best of the bad lot because he at least came from a generation of black politicians who came from the first iteration of the black political class, who realized they had to give some type of policy concessions to their black population, i.e. Maynard Jackson, who developed a black middle class base, even though he didn't do much for the black poor. So what happens is that, you know, some would say that these guys were better than the neoliberal kind of Obama, Cory Booker, Harold Ford Jr., Adrian Fenty manifestation, who don't give a damn about doing anything or giving any kind of concessions to their black constituents, and all they're really interested in doing is serving the needs of their corporate Wall Street finance capital backers.
No, you're not gonna have another generation of black elected officials like that one, because they were their election and then their administrations were inhabiting that what ended up being irreconcilable from the beginning, irreconcilable contradiction between a kind of electorally articulated community-based black self-determination nationalism kind of thing, a kind of sustainability kind of thing that was about black political self-determination within the electoral structure, and simultaneous with that, a broad cultural, political, and police repression of black radical movements. I mean, that's what created that generation of black elected officials. I mean, you're not going to see that probably within our lifetime again.
Can I ask, do you think? So we're saying like, hey, we get you like a line between the politics of people like Marion Barry, seeing a difference between the politics of people like Clyburn, James Clyburn, or Hakeem Jeffries.
I think there's a distinction between Clyburn and Jeffries. Clyburn still comes from the old guard. He still has to be, you know, he's still interested in material concessions for his constituency as long as they are able to maintain his hegemony over the South Carolina primary system. But Hakeem Jeffries is a pawn of the Wall Street banks. He's a complete neoliberal shill. You know what I'm saying? He'll sign on to gentrification, charter schools, or anything else that guts the state apparatus as long as his donor base is happy. You know.
Do you see Jamal Bowman as any type of like?
I think that what's fascinating, right, is that with the iteration. I think to answer your question, I think with the iteration of the Bernie Sanders phenomenon, and you have this kind of quote unquote progressive, TM LLC kind of vibe coming out now, it creates a conundrum, right? Because what happens is that the traditional black politics is now, since it's centered to the right in the Democratic Party with the neoliberals, it's facing progressives to their left who are multicultural, who are challenging them on their record. Some of them are black, some of them are white, and I think it opens a space for the progressives to at least have the illusion of being more interested in a kind of class-wide basis overall. But I don't think they're going to play the same kind of racial patronage, ethnic politics that we got from the Marion Barry, Maynard Jackson tag. I think that those days are dead, and I don't think that there's enough actual patronage to give out because the pie is shrinking, right? Like there's a reason why the black political class that comes to power during deindustrialization and urban blight isn't able to govern like my man from the Daley regime in Chicago in the 50s. Daley's in Chicago in the 50s during the time in which New Deal largesses of bankrolling urban environments, suburbanization, mass urban development all over the country. The black urban regimes are coming into power when American capitalism is contracting. You have deindustrialization, and you have urban blight expanding all over the world, white flight, et cetera, et cetera. So these cats were never going to be able to be the quote-unquote manifestation of black power or black political aspiration that people thought they were going to be, quite frankly.
I think bureaucratically, there's also a big difference between those times and now. Just with like what is called like pork barrel spending, but just the ability for for members to directly write into bills, this amount of money is going to this district specifically, and like that caused a whole lot of corruption. But it's what actually allowed some of these like some of the earlier on black politicians to actually get some of those concessions. That 1-for-1 swap Yeah, I mean, it was able to actually, gain some material conditions. But at the end of the day, it's like, what are you giving up? And that just ability is no longer there, from the federal level. And so it's something that, like, when it talks about federal money, no longer going down in that direct exchange type of thing, there might not even be the ability for those type of, I guess, population specific politicians to even deliver for their communities in that way that they used to be able to. But
we should do a whole Harold Washington, Michael Jordan show.
Who?
Remember Harold Washington? Pascal?
Harold Washington, mayor of Chicago versus Michael Jordan.
Well, that was a whole thing. Michael Jordan wouldn't endorse Harold Washington.
Yeah, he wouldn't endorse him.
Republicans buy shoes too.
I forgot about that.
Oh yeah.
Well, that wasn't Harold Washington. No, that was not Harold Washington. It was a North Carolina guy who was running.
It was Gant.
Gant, who was running for Senate or Congress. I think it was for Senate.
It wasn't Harold Washington?
No, it wasn't Harold.
No, it was the dude Gant running for Senate against that old cracker. What's his name?
I mean, I'd love
that was in office forever.
Can't believe I can't forget his name.
Jesse Helms?
Yes, Jesse Helms. Yeah. I just know him as that old cracker. My bad.
Who?
That's
well,
fine.
so what do you think is worse? Jordan saying Republicans buy people's shoes, or Republicans buy shoes too, or LeBron James
making these movies,
cutting down the NBA strike once Obama gave him a call?
Well, let's add this to LeBron James. Not only does that with a Barack Obama, LeBron James also helps fund, because he's a producer on the Bombshell movie, which totally launders the reputation of some horrible Fox News.
Yeah.
He's also part of this Judas and the Black Messiah. His production company's name comes up first when the movie comes on. So LeBron James is Michael Jordan 2.0, where Michael Jordan didn't say shit about anything. And then you have the era after Jordan, which is like, it's all about me, the era of the individual. We talking about
practice, man. Talking about practice.
LeBron James is the perfect media figure because he knows how to act in front of a camera. He can get in candid situations and say things along the lines of pretty much just Black Lives Matter. He can wear a hoodie and have his political statements that really don't say or do much. He is Jordan on another level.
I think the way I agree is that LeBron James demonstrates the way in which the particular moment of woke kind of symbolic protest merges with the capital involved in entertainment and sports, and creates its own kind of market for merchandising, like Black grievance and suffering, so it's like, again, back to my theme that like Black people are always reduced to spectacle. This whole phenomenon is a perfect example of what we're watching with Marion Barry. It's like, Black people are always reduced to spectacle, and it's part of the reality of what we talked about Black politics being about containment, about creating a structured otherized community that is relegated to a unitary social control, while they're really not even denied the capacity to exercise individual choice in terms of their politics because they're maintained as this kind of contained other. And some Black people actually believe that the containment is good, and they would make the argument that self-determination is a manifestation of that containment. Others don't, others would say that it's a problem, and this is part of the kind of internal conflict that we see within Black politics.
It's self-determination without autonomy.
Right. Well, the thing is, my whole position when I have people say self-determination is that, how do you have self-determination when the Black comprador bourgeoisie is part of the self that you want to have determined? Yeah. Are they not part of the self?
Yeah.
So I'll play a little bit more of this, and then I'm going to end the stream because we've gone on over 3 hours. I'm sure people have things they need to do. At some point, I have to pick up my child before I get yelled at.
But the surprises in this case were not over. On October 26th, Judge Thomas Penfield Jackson gave Marion Barry the maximum sentence, 6 months behind bars.
Well, I should have been shocked and stunned, but I'm not. I'm calm about it. I understand that there are different sets of standards for different people, and that's the American injustice system.
Barry served his 6 months and was released in May 1991. He returned to a hero's welcome from his supporters. Washington, D.C. had not heard the last of Marion Barry.
So yeah, that was the Marion Barry story.
Yeah, I'm gonna break out of here, gentlemen.
All right. Hey, thank you guys so much.
Thanks for inviting me on.
Tuesday, we'll be talking with Jean Bajlan, Cuba again. And I think there will be one more person. And I think we're taking a deep dive into the real inner workings of the military industrial complex. So